51. Hopefully we're not starting in 59 minutes, or I could have slept later.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's their friendly way of saying we're late in getting started, huh? Well, as soon as the appropriate people tell me that we've got the video rolling, then we'll get the meeting officially underway. Not only did I wear my Clean Water Services, but I brought my symbolic squishy ball.
All righty, good morning, Clean Water Services Budget Committee. I'm Clerk Moss, so we'll do a roll call here and announcements, and then I'll hand it over to Jack. So, Mark Ferrer. Andy Hogan.
Here.
Alex Pham.
Present.
Elaine Stewart. Hopefully we'll expect her momentarily. Matt Wellner.
Present.
And hopefully we'll expect Director Rogers momentarily. Director Willie.
Here.
Director Treese.
Here.
Director Fye.
Present.
Director Harrington.
Here, and Elaine Stewart is here as well.
Perfect. So just remember, you have to key your mics in front of you to catch it for that. And with that, over to you, Mr. Lang.
Thank you very much, Coach Moss. And good morning to members of Clean Water Services Budget Committee. First of all, I want to thank you for your attendance and your commitment to Clean Water Services Budget Review process. It's a very important process for us to for Clean Water Services financial transparency.
Is your mic on? Jack, is your mic on? The little light?
Yep. Oh, looks like it's on now.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect. Well, should I start again or should I continue? So, good morning. Thank you very much for your attendance and commitment for our Clean Water Services budget review process. If you're ready to start, I would like to start with a round of introduction for the staff as well. As you know, that our budget process is an annual process that has an extended team that's working on it, particularly our core team that is present here at the budget committee meeting today. And I would like to introduce the team to you. We'll probably start at the table, and I'll start. My name is Jack Liang. I'm the Chief Business Operations Officer at Clean Water Services. I pass it on to Kathy.
I'm Kathleen Leader, Chief Financial Officer and Budget Officer for Clean Water Services.
I am Diane Taniguchi-Dennis, CEO for Clean Water Services.
All right, and we'll move on to this side of the room. Start with Erin.
Erin Lowry, I am the district's finance manager.
Sorry, was not prepared. I'm Tanya Bakay, I am a financial analyst.
All right, thank you, Tanya. How about we circle around this way? In the first row, please.
Andy Braun, Capital Planning Division Manager.
Good morning, Caroline Longwell, General Counsel, Chief Compliance Officer.
Good morning, Joe Gall, Chief Utility Relations Officer.
Good morning, Damon Reishi, Development Services Division Manager.
I shouldn't have sat behind Andy. Rick Shanley, I'm the Director of Engineering and Water Technology, Interim Director.
Logan Olds, Chief Utility Operations Officer.
Lisa Huntington, Director of Natural Systems Enhancement and Stewardship.
Good morning, I'm Robert Baumgartner, Director of Regulatory Affairs.
Thank you, Bob. And we have some staff on the other side as well. Let's do an introduction, Kevin. Then Jody. All right, and we have two staff in the back who are part of the team as well. Would you guys like to do a self-introduction, please?
Good morning, I'm Stephanie Morrison.
Thank you for the budget kit, Stephanie.
You're most welcome. Team effort, Chair Harrington. I certainly am a small part of that. Good morning, I'm Katie Ragsdale, and I'm Executive Assistant.
All right. Well, thank you, team. As I mentioned, that every year this budget process is a very hard process that we go through, although that is relatively routine, but the team really putting a lot of effort and commitment into this process that actually end up with this package that's in front of you. I want to particularly recognize Aaron, Tanya, Jody, as well as Kevin, who are regularly on our budget core team that has been working for months before that we're able to present a proposed budget to you. So this team is really working hard. And with that, I'll pass it on to our CFO, Kathy, to get started with today's meeting.
And I'd like to also acknowledge that Director Rogers is now here.
Thank you, Jack. Well, first order of business for today at this meeting is to elect the presiding officer for the audit committee. And with that, I open it up for a motion for a chair.
I think, Kathy, you mean for the budget.
Sorry, for the budget committee. I'm ahead of myself.
That's quite all right. So I would like to make a motion to for us to elect Alex Fan as our budget committee chair.
So we have a nomination for Alex Vaughn. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second. Is there any discussion?
I would just like to note that the Clean Water Services Board of Directors always appreciates having a community member serve as the chair of the budget committee. It just gives us the opportunity to participate, but also to really uplift the role of community members serving on the budget committee, as well as CWAC, because you do a boatload of excellent work for us. So thank you.
So we have a first and a second for Alex Vaughn as the chair. How many in favor?
All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye.
Any opposed? So we have elected Alex. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much.
And you even have the gavel, sir. Don't worry, I'll make sure you don't use it too much.
So I'm going to start out today, just talk a little, giving you the opening on the budget committee meeting. So this budget committee meeting is being held in compliance with Oregon budget law. The committee is here today to receive the budget message, receive any public comment, and a final action will be to approve a budget for Clean Water Services for fiscal year 24-25. That approved budget will go to our board, and there'll be a public hearing once again in June where it will be adopted, and that will set our appropriation and expenditure level legally in the next fiscal year. Just to give you an idea of what the planning process looks like for Clean Water Services, Jack mentioned this is a big process involving a lot of different people. Planning starts in July and goes through April of each year. And during that planning process, we're looking at some key strategic areas, strategic financial planning, where we're looking at our cost of service study, we're looking at our long-range financial planning and reserve needs. We're also looking at our strategic operational planning, which is that roadmap that we developed. And we're looking at our CIP, and we're going to invest in our capital. So we're utilizing our East Basin Master Plan. We're going towards our West Basin, and also evaluating and going towards an asset renewal plan. These items develop our 5-year CIP and our roadmap, which are all pieces of our key foundational documents in our budget planning. So this planning then leads us into where we are here. We have a proposed budget before you today. And based on the approval of that budget, we will go forward in June, and there'll be a couple different actions that all relate to that budget document, one being the adoption of the budget itself, but also adoption of our 5-year CIP plan. We're going to invest our capital and money, update of our rates and charges that support the budget that is adopted, and setting of our pay plan for our employees. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our CEO, Yes.
Thank you, Kathy, and I'm glad to see everyone here today. So what we wanted to share with you are the business drivers that really impacted how we're thinking about the budget, not only for 24-25, but also going forward well into the future. So we're going to take a look at the investments in our people. We're going through a huge transformation with our people, and we're going to share you some slides to see what's happening. But essentially, half of our workforce is less than 5 years now. So there's really this big turn in generations that's occurring. We're going to talk about the investments that we need for regulatory compliance, There's certainly the needs for the current permit that we're implementing for the next 5 years, but we're looking ahead for the permit beyond. So the team will be talking to you about that because that sets investments that will need to be made. And we're always looking for when is that time we're going to have to do some technology changes, because that's when the investments get pretty intense, and we'll have the team with our engineering group that we formed as a new group, and we'll talk about the reasons why we did that in the organization. And then the business climate is certainly really impacting us in terms of the supply chain. It's taking a lot longer to construct things, and it's also the materials and the cost of those materials. So those are the three business environment drivers that we'll talk to you today and throughout the budget presentation. So let's take a look at our people strategy focus to really manage that people aspect of our investments. So we need to continually invest in our talented people. With the pandemic, we really stopped a lot of the training that went on because we could not travel. And now in this budget, we are restoring our training to pandemic levels. We are taking advantage when there are virtual training that is still available, but now the industry is now returning back to pre-pandemic levels in the types of training. We're investing more in our employee engagement and the experience that we have. We have all these new employees that we are merging with employees that have been here for a very long time. So we're making sure that we're able to engage our new employees to really develop and foster the culture that we want, that is a can-do, what is the possibility attitude, and as we move into the future. We're emphasizing our equity, diversity, inclusion, and we'll talk about that today as part of the presentations. And we want to remain competitive. We're actually having to compete for positions. The utility executives across the U.S. all talk about there's not enough people to go around. And unfortunately, we tend to compete with our neighbors, whether it's Portland or in Clackamas County, but it's really making sure that we can recruit and retain the talent that we need. We have the most complex treatment plants here in Oregon. And really, when you compare the technology that we have here because of the Tualatin River, it's really we have to compete nationwide. We have implemented the comp and class for the bargaining unit. Now the HR team is working on the comp and class for the non-bargaining unit. So it's for the team members not represented by the Teamsters Union. And we're taking a look at really improving our benefits for our non-bargaining units. Right now, their benefits, because of the increases in costs, because we're such a small pool, when you look at Clean Water Services alone, that there is a significant advantage for Clean Water Services to move to the Oregon Public Employees Benefit Program. It contains cost in the long run. It's a much bigger pool, and it's going to provide much better benefits for our team members and at a cost that's probably going to save us money over the long run. So the second, what I wanted you to take a look at here with this slide is really the CWS workforce. I know it's a really busy slide, but it's interesting. So the bars are where we are today. So what we provided here for you is the dashed lines as to where we were. The red line is where we were in fiscal year 22, and then where we moved sort of that golden color in 23, and then where we were in 24. And when you look at the baby boomer generation, what you're seeing is that movement from fiscal year 22 to this really declining numbers of baby boomers through that time period to where we are today. And that's a natural transition that happens because of retirements, but that represents a lot of knowledge that's leaving this organization that we're being very mindful of. When you look at the millennials and the Generation X, what you see is where we were in the red to the goldenrod to the green line. You can see the push of the increasing of those generations, and that makes a lot of sense. And then you see we're already bringing the Gen Zs into our organization. But the other importance of this slide, we always talked about the generation change with the baby boomers and succession planning. We're going to have to do the same thing with Gen X. That's a really large group that's going to be moving through their stages of their career and their lives. So Clean Water Services is really focusing in these next years to do the knowledge transfer and to creating the systems which relied on well-trained, long-tenured people into creating the procedures and the understanding of what we do internally to the organization. So that's another big focus for the group. When we look at workforce diversity as it relates to gender, we're moving in a direction where there are more female leaders coming into the organization. The water sector is really dominated by the males, but we are constantly looking for those leaders and providing opportunities so that we can get the most talented people here, and including investing in women. And certainly the board having a woman CEO is really a statement. I'm one of the few in the U.S., but that certainly, even with my age and my gender, it's actually increasing over time. The next slide is our employees of color. It's remaining a bit, it's stable. We have 16% now that are employees of color, and our Caucasian staff is 84%. But when I say this, it isn't to diminish, right, the people that are here at Clean Water Services, but we're actively looking to increase our diversity at Clean Water Services, making sure we're recruiting in the right locations and increasing the diversity of people that come to the careers in water. So that's an important metric that we're also watching. And our staffing levels, right now there's a real challenge in recruiting and retaining staff throughout this metro region, but also throughout the U.S. as it relates to water sector jobs. But the team is currently at 87% full, but when you really look at that 13%, there's a component of that group where they're under analysis of whether or not we actually need to replace those team members in kind, or we need to change the way we're doing business. So when you look at those numbers, we are actually achieving 90% of our positions that are currently filled. And when you look at some of our peers, they're running in the 80% levels. So Clean Water Services as an employer is doing well, and we will continue to do well in the future, but also induce business principles where we're looking at the positions as they become vacant and what we need to do to put them and the teams to work. Okay. I'm next going to shift to our regulatory compliance strategy. The compliance drives the bulk of the costs for a utility like Clean Water Services. So the team is currently implementing the program service levels that they need to address the new permit that started in January 1st to 2023. The purpose of the performance roadmaps is to really look at those things that we must do to achieve compliance, as well as the programs that we can add that provides better environmental outcomes and better connection to the environment within our region. But we have increased monitoring and compliance standards, and you're going to hear that today. We also have increased compliance standards on our air emissions that really impacted our ability to generate electricity at Rock Creek. The team will talk about the initiative for renewable natural gas that we're currently in discussions with Northwest Natural Gas on, which is an important use of the biogas that we produce through our treatment processes. The increased need for chemicals is driving a significant cost. Not only are the chemicals more expensive, but we have to use more chemicals. So that's another critical area that you're going to hear from the team about how they're managing it. And of course, our thermal requirements in making sure that we're monitoring the temperatures of the raw sewage that comes in and leaves the treatment plants, but also making sure we're managing our thermal compliance issues. People love hot water. In the region. So, Chair Harrington, you had a question?
Will you be touching later, or will staff in the presentations on what is driving the need for more chemicals?
Yes.
Terrific.
Yes, I'm sort of just kind of doing the highlights of what you're going to hear from the team. As we look at our long-term strategy, it's really the permit of the future, because we really need to begin planning for our next permit, as well as the adaptation strategies that we need here at the utility, because things are changing in the region, and it's being able to adapt to this. And this is a subject nationally about the permit requirements that are happening across the country. And we just had a meeting yesterday with the National Association of Clean Water Agencies talking about what's happening in the Puget Sound area and the strategies between rulemaking and when something hits on a permit. And the common theme is utilities have to prepare well into the future, because you can't afford to make technology changes on the fly within a 3-year period. It really needs to be planned out financially, and the team will be able to talk to you about our capital programming and really the strategy to looking at the permits of the future. And the Tuan River is a mighty but small, and I think the team likes to call a sensitive river, and that's really something that we're watching on. The business climate has been very interesting as we've recovered through the pandemic, but inflation is something that's impacting all of us, but it impacts a water utility. So the team will talk to you about chemical usage and the increases in cost of that commodity pricing, but also the fact that we're just using more, right? Electrical, natural gas, water utility rates have increased, so that also impacts our fundamental operations. But even more so, materials and construction, whether it's equipment or materials or even the cost of construction and how we're managing to be able to watch what those costs are and to try to take advantage of the sequencing of our projects. But the construction costs are increasing. We're really continuing to prioritize and sequence our capital investments, and you're going to hear about how we're doing that, because investing too soon in capacity is idle money, right? But not investing fast enough means we can't meet the needs of growth. So we have to make sure we're being planned and sequenced, and certainly the new CHIPS Act and the benefit that is coming likely to Washington County and how we're managing that is critically important to us. We're also looking at how do we increase our capability to respond to the industrial economic development in the region to make sure that we're partnering so we can plan ahead and really to sequence our capital projects. So the team will touch on that a bit. And really, it's this look at long-term financial planning based on a cost of services. The cost of rates, the cost of SDCs is what we're dependent upon to be able to deliver our services. And the team will share with you how we're managing the rates over the long term for clean water services and how we're remaining competitive with what's going on with our neighbors. And that's all based on some of the extra documents that we sent to you with the roadmaps as well as with our CIP. So you can see how the team relies on this long-range planning to be able to manage the costs for all of our ratepayers here at Clean Water Services and within our region. So the third comment is Clean Water Services priorities. So it's really about investing in our talented people. Our relationships with the city and with Washington County is very critical to us as we manage our utility, but it's that inflation, the pricing and economic factors. It's this implementing of this planned sequenced capital investments and the work that we're doing to improve it. And you're going to hear about how we programmatically changed by creating this core engineering team and putting a capital planning team together. And it's also being right on the spot for our industrial economic development planning, as well as promoting the equity, diversity, and inclusion with our organization, because it's going to create the culture that we want at Clean Water Services. So with that, we do have this strategic approach. We shared it previously with the board and with CWAC. It's really the long-term view of where we need to go, of the critical components of outcomes that we need to accomplish for Clean Water Services to meet the needs, not only for our employees, but also for our region. And as part of that strategic planning process, you do have the start of the fundamental program and department roadmaps. The board and CWAC will get more engaged in our strategic roadmaps because that's setting the stage. I think Roy always calls it that North Star. Where are you going in the long run? And I really believe that's the work of CWAC and the board is really going to support it. But we wanted the foundation strong in the organization. so that our employees know what we're doing and why we're doing it for the next 3 years. We also we're part of the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework. We did submit our light application, and we received a lot of continuous improvement feedback, and we're really appreciative of that because that's going to create a strong clean water services well into the future. So the team will talk about that with the Budget Committee. So who receives our services? Clean Water Services is being very focused on the cost to provide our regional-only services, as well as those that we provide regional and local services for. So the regional-only services, I'll talk about that next, is for Beaverton, Cornelius, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, Sherwood, Tigard, and Tualatin. So they're full-service cities. They can provide the local sewer and storm drainage services for their community. Then we have those that we provide the local service for. So that's for the urban unincorporated areas of Washington County and through IGAs for the city of Banks, Durham, Gaston, King City, and North Plains. We also provide the industrial services and the charges that are related to that because they're core to us managing our pretreatment programs here that Bob will talk about in regulatory affairs. So regional services, those are the plants, pumps, and our pressure lines. So we call it plants, pumps, and pressure lines. So it's things that are greater than 24 inches in diameter. It's really the permit that we integrate across the region. It's making sure we have the minimum stream flows in the Tualatin River, and it's our enhancement services for restoration and enhancement of our stream corridors that are key and pivotal to our watershed-based approach to compliance. So the local services, that's the services where we're designing and building the small diameter sewers. We're also managing the local services for the stormwater, so street sweeping, water quality facilities, and catch basins. So these are the services that the cities provide to the full service cities provide to the community, and this is what we provide in support of the unincorporated areas and through IGA with the cities. So we're really looking at how do we differentiate and begin cost accounting for this differentiation in service, and that's really critical to clean water services. So with that, I'm going to shift gears and give this over to Kathy Leader, unless the Budget Committee has any questions about sort of this, sort of a preview of what you're going to hear today.
Early in your presentation, you talked about recruitment, retention, those issues in relationship to human resources. How is Clean Water Services perceived by the potential pool of applicants? Are we considered a utility of choice? How does that look right now? And I know you have plans for the future perception.
Mm-hmm. I think we're looked upon as a employer of choice, but our compensation has been behind. So that's what we are correcting. People like to come to Clean Water Services to learn about the industry. Our other problem is when we train our team members up, they have opportunity to promote elsewhere because there's only so many promotional opportunities. And then we have examples where we have team members that have left us, but there still is a lot of value within that. So it's really managing that balance, finding a lifetime of a career here where you can come in as an intern, learn the business, and go all the way up to maybe become a CEO one day, right? So we're thinking about how to articulate it. But Clean Water Services is definitely viewed as a place to go to get your expertise. I want it to be a place where they stay for a lifetime of a career. But the generations are changing, right? The newer generations are more mobile than some of us baby boomers, right? So, but I thank you for that question. That's why employee engagement and being that employer where people want to live, grow, and thrive is really important to us.
Before we move on, and I just want to make sure, I know the seats in the auditorium are not the most comfortable. We do have some portable work tables in our work session room, so if that helps versus having a laptop in your lap. Also, there are some slightly more comfy chairs up here and workspace up here, so please do take advantage of them. It won't bother any of us at all. So just making sure you're all comfortable for the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the financial pieces of the budget. So this slide provides you a visual of the financial assumptions that were made in developing our 24-25 budget. We're showing that we're going to be utilizing current year revenues of $225.2 million to cover expenditures of operating and capital outlays of $141.5 million, debt, which is principal and interest payments, of $17.2 million, and capital investments of $104.4 million. You might note that the current expenditures exceed the current revenues in this visual by about $38 million, and that really reflects our planned investment of reserves in capital investments. So this gives you a historical trending of expenditures for the district. So you're getting 8 years of actuals, and fiscal year 24, the adopted budget revised, which means that it's the adopted budget that includes any board-approved transfers of appropriation, and then our proposed budget for 25. The dark blue line is the departmental expenditures. That's our labor and materials and services. The light blue is debt service. The green is our capital investment. And our other outlays is the kind of yellow golden area. And for other outlays, that includes utility bad debt expense, franchise fees collected and remitted to the cities, pass-through of local industrial flow and right-of-way fees to the cities, and any planned mid-year personnel adjustments that we would be taking to the board if we decided to implement those. You can kind of look, trending is usually pretty static, but there are certain areas over time do incur additional costs. So you see in 2019 that we had a significant increase in investment in capital, and that was, we had some large projects that happened during that year, like the Upper Tuolumne Interceptor and a couple additions to the Durham treatment plant and with secondary expansion. Also, a slight bump in other outlays in that year, and that really related to the spending of $15 million to establish a side account with Oregon Public Employees Retirement System to cover unfunded pension liability and stabilize our future PERS employer rates. Also, you might note that in 2020, other outlays also had a little bit of a bump there, and that related to expenditure of $39.5 million to fund an escrow and refund our Series 2011B bonds, and that actually gave us a net present savings of about $6 million. And for 24-25, those do show expenditure increases, and that's the story that we're telling today of some of the key areas we're looking to focus and spend money, one being on the labor and then chemical and energy costs on the labor and material services, and then also our investment in capital. So you see those peaking up there in that year. So revenue trends. This slide shows you, you also have this in your budget document, we provide you 2 years of actuals, the revised 24 adopted budget, and then the proposal for 25. So service charges are the largest revenue source for the district, budgeted $186.5 million in 25, or 83% of our current revenues. Growth in this revenue over time reflects adopted rate increases and customer growth. The second largest revenue source is system development charges, budgeted at $21.2 million, or 9% of the current year revenues. These fees are assessed on new customers connecting to the system to share in the costs related to existing and new system capacity and performance improvements. So these revenues are dedicated to capital projects. Other sources include investment income, budgeted at $10.1 million, Build America bond subsidies, that's a federal subsidy we get on our bond payments for our 2010 bonds, are budgeted at $1.1 million. And we have miscellaneous fees at $6.3 million, which includes miscellaneous fees, but also has grants and contributions from developers for construction projects. Yes. Yeah.
When I was reviewing this, I had a question about I see that the service charges are increasing, and then the system development charges are somewhat 2025 proposed isn't.
Yeah.
In fact, so I was wondering is there a way to balance?
Yeah, so system development charges is a volatile revenue source for us, and it really depends on what's going on in the member cities and as far as development. So large developments like commercial, industrial, or multifamily can add significant, but it really depends on what's in the happening in the area. So we in the proposed amount at 21 million this year, we're seeing it trending down. So we looked at our history and conservatively put in based on an average what we see in revenue collection. So we could outperform that, or we could underperform, just really based on rollout of development. Yeah. Yes.
Is that trending down just from knowledge of what's happening in the different expansion areas? Are you guys seeing fewer applications come in?
So in 23, we had some huge development in Hillsborough and Beaverton, just a significant infusion of SDC revenue. We aren't seeing that this year, and that's why then we kind of leveled out. So it really just depends on development happening, and it is sometimes hard to gauge what's going to be rolling out in the cities.
Okay, because I mean, a lot of that development was in the civil phase of construction. You guys don't get SDCs until actual permits are pulled.
Yes.
So I guess is there an anticipation that there's going to be fewer permits pulled in the coming years, because there's certainly a lot of lots out there?
Yeah. I think that's a good point of doing more outreach and being more aware of rollout. But yeah, the budget number that we put in, we're really just trying to be conservative, and we could outperform that. But yeah, at this point, based on our historical averages.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question.
Yeah.
On the service charge, you mentioned two elements that were contributing to the increases there over the years. I think you said planned adopted rate increases and then new customers coming on.
Yes.
What percentage impact do those two things have on that increase?
Yeah, so for the revenue, that would be based on our rate increase at 4%, and we look at our historical trending of growth in connections, and that's a 1% roughly growth a year.
Okay, and is there a point at which what's happening in the system development charges, the downward activity there, starts to reflect in the service charges of new customers coming on because there's less customers coming on, and that service charge rate of increase should come down?
Yeah, and that's true. Yeah, so development would definitely, and industrial, new industrial customers, that all impacts that growth component. So yeah, if you see new development going down, you might see leveling off of growth in customers.
Yeah,
but our service charges also include what all of us as customers pay for our use. So as Diane highlighted earlier, we here in our area like to consume water, including showers and whatnot. So the revenue is reflective of that as well.
Thank you.
I don't think was that your question, Mark?
Well, I was trying to understand that there's a path there on service charges that is pretty steep, and I'm curious about what the 5 and 10 year projection is. But as system development charges go down, there's a 3-year pattern of it going down. That's an indication of economic activity, and so the economic activity element of the service charge revenue portion should be impacted by less development happening, as it shows in our system development charges. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah.
How much of an impact is that having, and then might those revenues be coming down as well?
Right. So systems development charges are customers that are coming into the future. So we often have to make the capacity increasing project today, right? So then it's future revenue that comes in to pay for that share of the growth. So with the rates, we're trying to make sure that the rates are consistent and predictable. So our long-term strategy on the sanitary sewer side is to go from the 4% and hopefully be able to find that knee of the curve when we can bring that down. Our biggest impact in the future will be the stormwater charges. That's going to have to probably, so while we're levelizing the regional sewer, we're going to have to increase the storm. So we're constantly looking at that balance. So when we build capacity increasing projects, we have to do it now. We know that there's revenue coming in the future as people connect and they're dealing with the existing sort of deficiencies in the system. And then the new growth is dealing with that part of the capacity that was for growth. So it's constantly managing, right? And it's this dance in timing of money and the sequencing of the expenditures.
Thank you. Can I make a comment too? Mark, you're teasing out one of the central issues. The central issue is the hydraulics between what is the regional system and what's the local system. You're not saying it that way, but you're saying it a little differently. And the hydraulics are is if you've got a lot of capital costs because the regional system's going up, what's that cost? And then the local cost, what does it cost for us to provide service to them? They're not having lots of needs from a standpoint of big pipes at that point in time. But I can tell you intuitively, maybe they'll get at it today, it costs more to provide service on that local level than on that regional level. Think of it, wholesale and retail. Retail is always more expensive. So you got a great question, and hopefully you'll tease that out just a bit more during the day.
Actually, no, I'm not going to give up. Thank you, Matt. So when I look at the numbers here, and you look at the revenue, and you look at Intel, for example, and what the impact of any changes they make in terms of business operations, I would guess that is a big driver on these numbers that we haven't really talked about. And as a single entity, it's something that I want to keep in front of my mind in relationship to how we look at these numbers.
And definitely, when you look at our customer makeup, Intel is about 6.6% of our revenue. So we actually do have it in the budget document too.
It is. I've read it. That's right.
Yeah. So it's in the budget document. Let me find it in there for you.
That's okay. I just thought you could reference it.
Well, Kathy's looking. This is why the team wants to be very proactive in its work. Page
72?
Page 72. But our work with our large industrial customers is very key because they pay a large systems development charge that then covers their portion of the expansion of the treatment facilities. But we always have to work with them on what they're currently using in capacity, what their potential growth in capacity is, and managing it through the life of the capital infrastructure. But you're absolutely right, and that is why we teed up why we need to have that team that is closely coordinating with them. Because industries are moving to providing their own recycled water treatment streams. So we don't want to make investments unless we really truly understand what their needs are. So that is another budget proposal. But absolutely, if we have to make a major treatment capacity change, the team was active in looking what SDCs they would pay, and does that cover the cost? And that's a pretty clear direction that we have. And but being economical for everybody's choices. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So next we're going to move over to the expenditure trends. So similarly, we give you 2 years of actuals, the revised 24 adopted budget, and then what we're proposing in the 25 budget. So the proposed budget for fiscal year 25 includes current year expenditure of $263.1 million in total. Departmental expenses, that blue dark line, that includes personal services and material and services at a total of $130.3 million, and that's 50% of our current year expenditures. Our capital investment, as we mentioned, cost total $104.4 million, or 40% of that budget. Debt service, principal interest amounts total 17.2 million, or 6% of the current year budget. And other fund outlays is set at 11.1 million, or 4% of the budget. And it really is, we don't have any outliers in there currently, and it really just relates, as we mentioned, to the bad debt expense, franchise fees, and right-of-way fees of the cities, along with any potential mid-year personnel adjustments.
Just in terms of your description, what you were describing is the gray line.
Yeah, so the gray line, other outlays. So the gray line's other outlays.
No, in all of them. It's not the blue line, it's the gray line.
Oh, you're so right. Thank you so much. Yes, you're right. So for 25, you're right. Yes, gray is the 25 numbers.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yes.
I have a quick question about the departmental expenses. I'm guessing much of the climb is, the most recent climb is getting the pay more to the market as you're trying to recruit people. Is that correct? And do you think that's going to be leveling off as you finish your last bit of class comp work?
Well, I will say that for the operating increases, it's split evenly between almost evenly between personnel services, which is about a 10.5% increase, and material and services at the 15.3%. So yes, part of that is the labor component, but then on the M&S side, we're talking about some of the regulatory and inflationary impacts.
Thank you, Alex. Going back to that, I'm not sure I processed the climb in the capital versus the debt services in 2025. So the gray line for 2025.
Okay.
Capital, it's a climb. And then debt services is sort of stays the same.
Yeah.
So, and I couldn't process.
So on the capital side, we are planning in this year and the next couple of years, and Andy will talk about that later, some significant investments in capital. So that's why you see that uptick to 104.4 million in 25. That's in our CIP plan. On the debt service side, you see a drop. And that really is because in the 24 budget, we'd planned to issue debt at about 50 million on capital investment. We chose not to do that. We had the capital reserves to do it, and interest rates were not favorable, so we did not go forward with that. So 24 included some additional debt service in it, which we have eliminated then in the 25 budget because we didn't issue the debt. And we do see a trending down to debt service as we've been paying off that debt.
Yeah, so the way to think about it is you have one pocket that's your pay-as-you-go cash, right? It's the money that you have in savings and in reserves for utility. The other pocket is, instead of spending down cash, what you do is you go and borrow money, right? So we would issue bonds. And there's a cost to issuance of bonds. So that's what shows up at debt service. So that is where we've taken out loans, essentially, to build these projects. So we always try to find the right balance between using cash versus utilizing money that comes through the selling of bonds. So those are the sort of the two pockets. Yeah.
So as the capital expenditure increases, shouldn't the debt services increase as well?
Yes,
significantly.
They're only linked when we sell a financial bond, right? Mm-hmm. And right now the bond market is not in a good place. So we're always looking at what is the cost of borrowing versus the cost of having our money and the interest rates that we get. So there's always sort of that balance between the two.
But at the basic level, you can either use debt or you use your cash reserves. And that's what they talked about earlier.
And going forward, you'll see when we look at the forecast, the graph really shows that if you don't issue debt, this is what happens to your reserves because you're spending that down on your capital.
If you're building.
If you're building, yes, yes.
Or replacing.
Or yes, replacement renewal, yes. Mm-hmm. So the adopted budget, the proposed budget includes some assumptions on rate increases. In 25, we're looking at a 4% increase in the regional sanitary sewer rate and the regional surface water management rate for all customers in our service area. We're looking at a 4% increase also on the local sanitary sewer rate and the SWIM rate for the urban unincorporated areas and the direct service cities. This results in a average household bill for CWS only customers of an increase of $2.50 per month. So the system development charges are based on the increase is based on the engineering news record construction cost index, and that's set as of March of 2024, which is at 2.7%. So the sanitary sewers development charges are increasing by $185 for a total of $7,009 per equivalent dwelling unit. The SWIM SDC is increasing by $18 for a total of $678 per equivalent service unit. So this shows you the combined sewer and SWIM rate for Clean Water Services direct bill customers of for 25 at $65 per month. And we're comparing it to other comparables in the area, and it shows that we still are able to stay competitive with these cities, including Vancouver, Salem, McMinnville, Lake Oswego, and Portland, even though the district provides a substantially higher level of wastewater treatment than most in the region. The 10-year annual average increase in combined sanitary sewer and storm water management rates is 3.4%, you can see here. This trending reflects the district's adopted policy of reasonable rate increases on a regular or annual basis to promote predictability for the customer and revenue stability for the district. You note the dip there in 21. The district provided rate relief in fiscal year 21 to respond to the pandemic. The deferral of the planned rate increase in 21 resulted in a slight increase in rates in fiscal year 22. However, the district did not need to spike rates and have been able to stabilize planned increases in recent years.
You said rate relief, but it's really rate increase relief.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
I just, because we didn't lower anything.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I just want to clarify that.
Okay. So this is showing you, so this is the 24 rates, not the proposed 25. This is the fiscal year 24 rates for the jurisdictions within our region. So showing first CWS there on the left, and the blue area is the regional rate being charged by all, as Diane said, by all of the cities, Hillsborough, Beaverton, Tigard, Tualatin, Forest Grove, Cornelius, and Sherwood. The green line is the local area in charge. So for Clean Water Services, the regional is at $46.05, the local is at $16.45, so the total bill for a monthly customer is $62.50 on average for Clean Water Services. In most cases, the local rates charged by the cities have been consistently higher than the local rates charged by Clean Water Services, and the variance has grown in recent years. The green line there represents the volume of customers by account by jurisdiction. So CWS has been able to maintain lower rates for local services due to the size of the service area's customer base.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how with the smaller customer bases over those different cities, how they have to spread that cost over fewer accounts. Thank you.
And this just graphically shows you the customer base. Clean Water Services bills for just under 61,320 customers in the urban unincorporated Washington County and 13,180 in the cities of Banks, Durham, Gaston, King City, North Plains, for a total customer base of 74,500. So this is approximately 41% of the customers in Washington County. The 7 incorporated cities have a smaller customer base to spread costs of operation over and have increased their local rates to meet individual local operating needs, including right-of-way fees that they assess.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. The 41%, is that the UUAs or the green?
So the blue. So it's the UUA and the direct cities that we bill.
Got it. Thank you.
At some time, not today, I'd like to understand the decision-making process that the municipalities go through for the billing.
Okay.
For another time.
Yes.
Is there any plan over time as that 4% increase results in a larger percentage from the customer or to the end user? Is there any plan to inch that down over time to try to keep the actual dollar increase to the customers in check?
So we are currently in the process of updating our cost of service study, and the main basis of that is really identify the cost to provide service, not only just for sanitary, sewer, and storm, but also that regional and local component. So as we develop those forecasts and the level of service, we will be adjusting the regional and local by utility differently, just based on, so really truly trying to cover the cost of the service being provided.
So another way to answer this question, so the regional cost is spread amongst everybody in Washington County. So I see a future where we're able to, at least on the sanitary sewer side, probably get back to that 3.5 and that percent increase. On the local portion of the sanitary sewer side, we were really based mainly upon maintenance. Operations and maintenance. There is a need to do more investment in the local lines for the unincorporated customers and potentially for the small cities. So that component will need to be studied. As it relates to surface water, the regional fees probably need to go up a little bit more to be able to meet the needs of the increasing stormwater regulations that are coming. Clearly, also on the stormwater for the local side, it's mainly constructed for operation and maintenance. There are needs in unincorporated that we're really going to have to study because there is very little capital money that can go towards the stormwater facilities for the local. So this is why we're really looking at cost of service. What's needed for the regional versus what's needed for the local, what's needed for O&M versus what's needed for capital. So that is the work ahead. Stormwater on the local side for the unincorporated is probably behind what their needs are. But it's complicated because they were developed more on rural types of standards as opposed to the current modern stormwater infrastructure, curb and gutter, catch basins, detention, water quality facilities. So that's really the work of CWAC and the Budget Committee into the next few years to programmatically understand that. Because we heard the voices from our cities loud and strong. They don't want the regional services and the money we receive on the regional side to somehow inadvertently or planned to subsidize the local program. And that's right now financially we're segregating our accounts to be able to understand that and to be able to articulate that.
So I have a follow-up question for you. It is kind of striking on the previous graph, looking at the rate increases, 3.5%, 4% over, years. It's the increases are sustained higher than what inflation had been in many of those years. But if I'm understanding the challenges for clean water services correctly, there's PFAS, there are other kind of technological and other capital issues and such coming along that this may simply be something that we live with for a number of years. Does that seem fair to say?
Yeah, that's a great segue to a graph that Kathy's going to show you. Okay, yeah.
So first, we're going to talk about the expenditure side. So the proposed budget reflects a total expenditure of $263.1 million, and that's an increase of $28.5 million or 12% compared to the prior year. $17.6 million increase in capital investment, $12.4 million in operating budget, $1.8 million debt service, and just $301,500 in other outlays. So for the operating budget, $12.4 million increase, 10.5% increase overall. That includes, as we talked earlier, personnel services at $7.8 million. This reflects our baseline as we invest in people. The goal is staying competitive in the market, recruit, retain, and develop talent. And it also includes pay structure modifications and cost of benefit increases. On the material and services side, we're seeing a 15.3% increase, really related to that regulatory and inflation. On the chemical cost side, we're seeing an increase of about $379,000 or 7%, reflecting an increase in expenditure to meet regulatory requirements and ongoing supply chain and inflation. On energy costs, increase of $910,000 or 22%. It's a combination of rate increases and regulatory compliance requirements on air emission that impacts the ability to operate Rock Creek cogeneration equipment, which then requires additional electrical purchases. Software licensing, we're increasing by just over $700,000 or 30%. This reflects an addition of investment in modern technology and data management, workflow automation, and cybersecurity to support Clean Water Services' growing operations and mitigate security risk. We're also seeing an increase on the natural systems contracting side. So they're incorporating some of the projects into the operating budget that was originally used to be reported in the capital budget. So they're adding contract services totaling about $1.6 million as a transition of the stewardship operations from capital to operating. And so you'll get a lot more additional information on those areas as the departments speak on their parts.
One item that I'll be interested to hear more about through the presentation is with the impact of the ash borer beetle. I'm not saying that right. And all of the plant material, how we should settle that out in our minds, not only for this upcoming fiscal year, but in future years, since that material will be lost and will need to be replaced, and the effect.
So this slide has a lot going on it. This really reflects the district's current 10-year financial forecast that we plan for needed rate increases, impacts on operating and capital spending, and identify needs for debt issuance. So the red line that's solid and then dotted, that represents current year revenues by year. So the solid line is actuals, the dotted line is estimates from our forecast. The layered bar, that represents expenditures by fiscal year. And so then projects, and so you're aware on the forecast, so that we have actuals and then our revised budget and proposed budget for 25, and then our forecast going out. And when you're looking at our forecast that we currently put these numbers together on, it projects operating expenditures for outer years, increasing by 7% annually for labor and wage and benefits, material and services at 4%, and capital cost spending comes right from our 5-year CIP plan. On the revenue trending side, that includes in it our current forecast that has 4% rate increases and 1% growth over time. And the black line there, the solid black is actual, dotted is estimate, that is our reserves. So that is showing there reserves going down as capital spending is going out in those outer years when there's no debt service happening. There's no added debt to fund capital projects. So you see that going down there. The blue line up above, in the next slide we'll talk a little bit about that. That is, we're putting together a new reserve policy that we'll be bringing to the board. But this is our estimate of target reserves, one flat rate over time, just to kind of represent for you where our reserves are now and where our target is. And so obviously, over time, we'll be needing to look at potential financing of investment in capital. Yes, okay, yes. So the numbers are our coverage ratios for debt. So we're required to hold a 1.2 coverage ratio, so that's how many times your net operating covers your debt. We have a very strong coverage ratio, as you can see in actuals there at 4.89 in 22 and 7.5 in 23. And in outer years, because we've been paying off debt. That is a significant coverage ratio. So that really gives us a lot of leverage for good financing of debt and good and low interest rates going forward.
So the gap between...
Higher number is a better number.
A higher number is a better number.
So the gap between the dotted black line in 28 and the light blue line above is the need for debt.
No, so let me help explain this.
Okay.
So that blue line, I wanted the board and CWAC to show that light blue line. That's like the upper control limit of what you would want in reserves. That's really the upper limit. What you'll notice with the black line, that is the actual reserve that we have as cash in unappropriated balance. So the solid line is actuals.
Right.
The dotted line is a projection if the district spends all of that money into the future. And what you find is every year the team will say that it's on a decline, but it's actually always increasing. So what I'm looking for is that knee of the curve when we actually start using our unappropriated balance to induce investments in technology change out. And you'll see why this becomes important. So the black line is the current trajectory of ending balance. I wanted to make sure that we had an upper control limit for that. What they don't show here is a lower control limit, and that's what the team is going to be working on. You'll also see that dotted red line. That's the actual revenue in the solid line, and the dotted line is potential projections. What we've always wanted with this utility is to really watch where the actuals are going, because utilities can sometimes begin doing financial projections based on the future, not considering the velocity of what's actually happening. And that's always been the key to clean water services. It's not just the projections, it's actually looking at the current velocity. So right now, our velocity for ending balance is increasing. So that's why we're keeping the rate moderated where it is. The moment I see it's going too high above the upper control limit, then we'll bring our rate increases down. The moment we see that this is actually declining, that's when we'll take a closer look at rates. But I do not want rate projections of 12% because of future expenditures. We have to be this is the practical and pragmatic side of clean water services.
So how do we look at this in terms of a trigger for debt issuance?
Debt issuance is really the issue related to building generational types of projects. Right. So for instance, the biggest debt service will be our repayment for the Scoggins Dam. So in a sense, it's borrowing money because we're going to have to pay it over time. So that is a debt issuance. So the balance that we're holding in reserves to manage that payment will be released to do other things once we see what that actual cost is going to be well into the future. So
that's why I thought there was a relationship between those two lines, but
there is. One's an upper control limit, one's the actual balance, and the other are potential projections if we are correct on our projection with rate. You'll also notice that solid red line, its velocity is higher than what the dotted line projection is. So that's why it's the two things, right? The potential future and actually where you are in any given moment. And that's what we're managing. And we'll show you a slide to get to Elaine's question of why, if you don't do this, what happens to you as a utility. Yeah.
Yeah.
You may be getting to this later, but am I understanding from the dark blue portion at the very bottom that the personnel budget over this 6-year period will double from 50 million to 100 million?
So you have 2 years of actual and then the current budget and adopted. Yeah, so for personnel services, we show a 5% on average in our forecast. And that's based on historical trending and looking at FTE adds, cost of benefit increases. So this is a forecast based on historical trending and when you take the bar from where you're at right now, how it goes out into the future based on those escalators.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand.
Yes.
Am I reading it correctly
Yes.
that it will double from 50 to 100 million over the 6-year period?
So from 22 to 28, yes. But
So-
if you're looking at 25 to 28, the dark blue is personnel, and then the light blue is, and then kind of lighter blue is M&S.
It's looking over, from 22, it's looking over your shoulder and into the future.
Yeah.
And that's the potential.
Potential.
If we stay on the current trajectory. So in any given year, we're looking at the current vacancies, what we need for talent. But if all things are equal, that's the potential. That's why we are very pragmatic on what we propose in any given year.
And I think from a prior chart, from 20 to 24, I think the employee count that you showed on chart 10 went from 390 to about 490. So it added about 100 employees in that 4-year period. So in this 6-year period, with a $50 million increase, what is the number of personnel that would be added over that 6 years?
So if I may step in for a little more information, Mark. First of all, I want to point out that there's a difference between the actual numbers and our budgeted numbers. So in a way, when we're comparing the FY22 and 23 against the 24 and on years, there's a little bit of gap there because the 22-23's budgeted number is going to be higher than the actual number. And we presented the actual is just to kind of help draw out that line. So you can think of it's not, if you say that if it's doubling in that 6 years, that's not exactly accurate because that we're comparing actual in those front 2 years and budgeted numbers in the last few years. And then in terms of the cost increase, it's not only that the number of FTEs that are increasing, it's also the inflation that we're kind of adding, cost of living adjustments that will add to the number of employees. And then we're constantly looking at our benefits and the insurance, all the extra costs that actually goes in addition to the salary. So there is a little bit of the inflation factor that gets added to in addition to just the number increases, which kind of adds to the graphic that you have. And just as Diane mentioned, that this is our projection of where the trend is going. Quite frankly, when we make each year's decisions, we always try to make a very prudent decision to have only enough FTEs that we need to provide the services.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to understand the numbers, the pure numbers. So over that 6-year period, what would we project the employee count to increase by?
So,
Well, I can tell you that in the forecast itself, we utilize as a historical, and so 1.5 million a year was added FTE. Now, whether that would be where we go, that's like we mentioned, year by year we evaluate our need for position adds. But to put a forecast together, we looked at trending historically and then brought it forward.
So we're bogging down a little bit in FY28 when we're actually here on FY25. So what the forecast was just looking at was if we continued on with current trends.
Yes.
Okay? So that isn't to say this is what you actually do. But if you take current trends and forecast them forward into future years, having that forecast helps inform what variables you might change, not only for this year, but the following year or two, in order to manage difficulties. It's not to say that we're going to have FY28 that turns out this way. So just trying to contain the discussion a little bit so we can keep our forward momentum on our agenda.
Thank you, Chair.
With that, so that light blue line you saw on the other page with the target of fund reserves, the district is currently putting together a updated reserve policy in areas of risk. The reserve funds provide protection from risk. The reserves are meant to address unexpected or non-recurring costs. CWS faces risks like revenue shortfalls during recession, regulatory mandates, and losses from extreme events like earthquakes, floods, and fires. Reserve funds help ensure that CWS can respond quickly and decisively to these types of situations. Reserves also support vital public services during periods where revenues decline. These resources are critical and core elements of CWS's financial planning and fiscal stability, but also serve other purposes, They contribute to the preserving the district's overall bond rating, minimize the need for short-term borrowing to meet cash flow needs, provide a funding source for capital investment, and ensure the long-term stability of programs and services for the district. So in looking at our reserve policy, just to give you a preview of where it's going, we picked 3 of the risk areas. Operating reserves, that's our Fund 101 and 201 for operations. Currently, we're looking at targets of 6 months to 1 year of operating expenditures. That's giving us this range of $55.5 million to $111 million in operating reserves. On the liability reserve side, so that's our risk management, self-insurance. We looked at a 10-year average on claims and have a range right now based on our liability exposure of $5.3 million to a target of $36.5 that really brings in some of those earthquake and other types of unplanned events. On the capital reserve side, that is looking at our capital programs, so our replacement rural funds like 106 and 206, and our new capital investment of 112 and 212. When we looked at our funding levels in there, we looked at anticipated service area growth and scheduled replacement of existing infrastructure, and right now we have this range that we're working on at $50 million that's in there in 24 with this target of $337 million, really based on some of these other out there projects like the infrastructure at the dam and potential future regulatory needs at the facilities. So in looking at that, so for fiscal year 24-25, we have estimated unrestricted ending fund balance based on the budget before you of $369.5 million that's in this budget, compared to that target that we put in place of $483.5 million. So we are refining that reserve policy, and we will be bringing that to the board in the near future. So this slide gets to the aha moment that Diane mentioned. So this is showing you the blue line is Clean Water Services rate increases over time. It reflects level, steady rate increases over time, and we're comparing that to the increases that you see in other utilities over the past 10 years, and they've seen some rate spikes because of the significant capital investments that have needed to be and debt that has needed to happen for projects. And the district does also have capital investments that will need to be taken care of over time, but our goal is to develop our strategic planning documents such as the financial forecast, the reserve policy, and that CIP book to plan and manage for future costs and maintain stable rate increases and avoid spikes in rates to meet capital needs. So having those reserves to help maintain stable increases.
I have an observation, and I don't know the answer to this, which I should. City rates are not really indicative of cost of service because they put other items in there. A lot of them will load in everything from road fees to other kinds of charges. So have we parsed it out so we know these are strictly sewer rates on our comparisons between cities and us, or is it just raw what they charge because they charge and then add in?
These are actually water rates for those other jurisdictions. Pure water rates.
Pure water.
Mm-hmm,
and they don't
compared to our.
And they don't load any other costs to your awareness.
No, other than right-of-way fees and such that they include in their rate structure.
And this is only the percent increase that we're looking at.
Yes.
Percent increase.
Over that 10-year period.
So you can see why Clean Water Service has developed this very practical approach, right, to planning ahead for technology. Because if you don't do that and you have to make a huge investment in the next year or the subsequent years, the spike has to occur. So we've been trying to adopt this very practical approach to manage the money and the balances so we can utilize it to do rate stabilization. So that's really the purpose of what we're doing, is stabilizing the rates over the long term and planning ahead. Because you can't do a huge investment like this without spiking the rates unless you plan to save money along the way. So we talk about being very good squirrels. we save our money Even though we see a trajectory potential for an increase, we're always looking at practically what is it. And it's really been a principle since when Bill Gaffey was here back in the 80s and 90s into where we are today. And this approach is very important through this next time period, so we don't have a story where Clean Water Services is having to raise rates like that to our rate base. So that's the story we were trying to tell about how we're planning way ahead and not having these huge spikes by really understanding what we need to invest in and when. But that is the legacy of Clean Water Services planning.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Braun to talk about our capital investments.
Good morning again. My name is Andy Braun, the Capital Planning Division Manager for Clean Water Services. I'm excited to be here this morning and talk with you about the capital improvement plan and the budget impacts that has. So I'll start off by saying the Capital Planning Division is a brand new division. Diane alluded to it a couple times in some of the reorganization that we've been doing. She mentioned the new Engineering and Water Technology Department that Rick Shanley will talk about when we start to get into the departmental budgets. There is many of the divisions within that department are brought over from other previous existing departments that we had. But the Capital Planning Division, one of the 5 divisions within Engineering and Water Technology, is brand new. And it's really looking at this comprehensive capital improvement plan. Traditionally, it's been the capital improvement plan has come about from each of the different departments that are responsible for a part of the plan. So buildings, water resource recovery facilities, conveyance departments, and all of those different elements of the capital improvement program have been kind of lumped together at the end and said, okay, here's the plan. So the Capital Planning Division is focused on a number of things, but one of these is being more consistent with that overview on what does the whole plan look like when we bring it all together. So there are a number of different objectives that I'll go through here that are shown on the slide. The first one is really looking at that annual, the annual budget and trying to stabilize that. If we look back at the last number of years and the budgeted capital improvement fund each year, or the budgeted expenditures, it has bounced all over the place. It jumps up, it jumps down. So one of the things that we're trying to do is look at how can we be more consistent with that. So I think you'll see in this year's 5-year projection that we're starting to achieve more of that stabilization, around $100 million a year, a little bit more than that. The other thing that we're trying to do with that is bring our budgeted amount and our actual expenditures, make those numbers converge. We always end up budgeting more than what we usually spend. Sometimes it's in the order of 70%. So we'd really like to make those lines converge and get them closer to 80 to 95%. It's going to take a while before we get there, but that's part of the goal. Second area is implementing the recommendations that came from the Government Finance Officers Association. A couple years ago, they provided a number of different recommendations. Gosh, I think there were close to 50 different recommendations in their report. And it's going to take a number of years to get all of those implemented. A lot of them have to do with future forecasting and understanding how the capital improvements also affect our rates and our operating expenses. Other ones just deal with the transparency of the capital budgeting. So that's part of what our function will be. Improving the sequencing of the master plans. So if you recall, 2 years ago, the board adopted the East Basin Master Plan, and we've been giving periodic updates to the Clean Water Advisory Commission on the West Basin Facilities Plan. We have about 6 or 7 months left to go with that. We anticipate wrapping that up about the end of this calendar year and bringing that approval or adoption of the West Basin capital plan or facilities plan to the board in the early spring of 2025. That is really going to be the crux of a lot of the capital improvement plan moving forward. And you may see some significant differences in the capital improvement plan next year when we get those projects incorporated. It is a 20-year plan. There's some large investment. We're looking at our growth areas. We've talked a little bit about the CHIPS Act and the infrastructure that will be necessary to support industrial growth throughout the region. Also talked a little bit about the residential growth that's happening throughout the district and the projects necessary to support that. So you will probably see kind of a difference in projects, some projects that are not currently on the 5-year plan that will come about once we adopt the West Basin master plan. The other thing that we'll be working on that is, while that plan, that 20-year plan, is a snapshot in time at the time that plan was developed, as we move forward in that time, some things, when the development of that plan is really a crystal ball, and the further we get out, the cloudier it is. As we progress through that period of time, things become more clear. Developments either happen more quickly than we expected or not as quickly. Industrial growth happens more quickly or doesn't happen as quickly. So we'll be taking an annual or continuous look at those planned projects and adjusting them. The master plan may say we need to implement a large project in 2028. Well, if the projects that were driving that project are not coming about as quickly, we may be able to bump that back to 29, 30. So we're constantly monitoring the development and the growth to implement those projects at the right time. Diane mentioned the strengthening our renewal and replacement program. We're very good at knowing or finding where we have some deficiencies in the system and getting on them and fixing them before they cause a problem. What we really need to strengthen is that longer-term forecast and making sure that we are replacing and renewing our infrastructure so that we don't hit a bubble, 10 years from now, where we find, or 20 years from now, whenever it might be, that our infrastructure reaches a critical age and suddenly we find ourselves having to do much more replacement of the system than what we do annually. So it's really trying to get a handle on that renewal and replacement program to stabilize it so we don't hit a bubble, which then affects our budget. And then again, just improving our project information management. And again, that's working with each of the departments that develop a portion of the capital improvement program and making sure that we're doing that in a consistent manner among all the departments to bring together a comprehensive plan. I did want to say I'm a little bit remiss in talking about where the capital improvement is, the program is in your budget books. So I think it's on page 89 to about 98 with a project list from pages 323 to about 334. But then really what we want to highlight is, that one budget book covers a lot of different things. Capital has its own full book here in gruesome level of detail if you want to get into every project. We do have a summary at the beginning of this book, which really talks about some of the overview and some of the largest projects that we have coming up.
Can I ask, and this may be too detailed of a question, or you can just capture it and point me to the right place. I'm always fascinated by conveyance, the gravity sewers and the pump stations. And on page 93, you talk about how conveyance comprises 25% of the CIP and 47% of the 5-year CIP. And pump stations and associated force mains represent more than half of the estimated conveyance cost. So I'm just wondering, when I think about pump stations alone, and the use of pump stations reflects the land use development growth over a course of time. And we've learned a lot with Clean Water Service, or I did, with Clean Water Services celebrating its 50th anniversary about the growth of the utility over time, the maturation of the utility over time, and the replacement, for example, of the different basins at the water resource recovery facilities. So I'm wondering too about the number of pump stations, and for like renewal and replacement of pump stations, is what our forecasts might be over the course of time for replacing that equipment.
We like gravity lines versus pump stations, but there's times when we have to put pump stations in because of the way things are developing. We're entering the next 20-year era where we're actually needing pump stations. But we always look to see when we can decommission a pump station because the gravity system has grown. So it's really sort of the both. We currently have 44 pump stations, yeah. And I think that's probably going to grow on the order of probably 50 to 55. But we're always looking at when we can decommission. So the pump stations help us sometimes in the interim, sometimes they're a long-term. Pump stations have a higher operating and maintenance cost.
Yeah.
So we're always trying to balance. So often we'll have a pump station that we call a temporary pump station, but it seems to have a life longer than often that we anticipate. But it's always finding that balance.
But I'm just assuming, it's equipment.
Yes.
There's an engine there.
Yep.
And I don't know what the life cycle is of said engines, and how that might affect the numbers over time, not the conveyance cost, because you've captured that here. So
yeah,
anyway.
Pumps. Yeah, it's pumps, and they generally have a 25-year life. You have to rebuild the pumps. You saw that with the team, especially when the pumps get plugged up. But the pipelines, we hope that they have a much longer time frame, right? 50 years. So that's why we're always looking way out into the future, but also seeing what we need to help the region develop incrementally. And pump stations is a key piece. But you're right, there's a cost to the pumps, the electronics, the mechanical, electrical, and the structural systems, right, that go with that. But yeah.
Thank you.
Barrington, I've always been fascinated with that number as well. I've been here 20 years, and when I started, we had 42 pump stations. The 44 that we have today are not the same. 42 of those 44 are not the same because, just as Diane said, we decommissioned some. Interestingly, as the district has grown, sometimes we go onto the backside of a mountainside, and we put a new pump station down at the bottom, and we can decommission the pump station that had been at that location. But it is very interesting, and Diane is correct. We have a lot of growth that is being supported by new pump stations that are coming on. You'll actually see a bubble over the next couple years of some projected pump stations to serve some new areas. We have the Cooper Mountain area and development in Banks that we're anticipating, a number of pump stations in Tualatin. So you're right, the number of pump stations will be growing, so will be a capital component there, as well as the renewal and replacement of existing pump stations, which have different components that get replaced at different intervals.
One of the reasons why I think about this is on page 27, you talked about population growth, and if I did my math correctly, I think it's a 13% increase over 5 years, which is a pretty impressive number.
Okay, and as you kind of alluded to, the number and the percentages that you gave about what portion of the capital improvement program constitutes conveyance improvements now versus over the 5-year period. I mentioned how we're trying to do some balancing and stabilization of the fluctuation of that number. And this graph kind of shows that with the different categories of spending that we'll be doing in the capital improvement program. So you'll see that I believe the light blue is the conveyance system, and the 24-25 budget is a smaller component of it compared to when we get out to 2027, 2028 time frame. And that's reflecting more that 47 to 50% of the overall capital improvement program. At the same time, some of our other categories are shifting downwards. You'll notice the large expenditure in the next couple years on building facilities. We have 3 large building projects going on now. That number will start to drop off at about the same time that the conveyance improvements are increasing. So again, it's all kind of this balancing act to keep a fairly stable progression of spending.
That light blue replacement or new facilities?
A lot of that is new facilities. I don't have an actual breakdown on that, but yeah, I think a lot of that is some new facilities, although when we get out to that 27, 28 time frame, a lot of that is associated with the FANO solutions. There's a large wet weather pump station that will go in with that, a very large renewal and replacement renewal of the existing trunk line, and a lot of inflow and infiltration abatement and control. So there is a large portion of that which is renewal and replacement as well.
Okay, great.
So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the notable largest projects that we have coming up. So I selected some of the largest projects from a number of different categories. This is on the sanitary side. You'll notice the Forest Grove primary treatment project. We reflect both what we anticipate spending this coming fiscal year as it pertains to the budget, but we wanted to give you a concept of what the overall project is because these are multi-year projects. So the Forest Grove primary treatment is really a regulatory project in response to the new copper rules and some new technologies to treat copper. So about just under $18 million of anticipated expenditure next year, but overall it's close to a $33 million project. Talked about the building facilities. So our next largest project next year is one of those facilities. It's the Research Innovation Partners and Laboratory. We often refer to it as the Ripple building in Forest Grove. Again, about $11 million this coming year. Overall project and investment in that facility is about $60 million. The Rock Creek Primary Clarifier Project. This is a project at the Rock Creek Water Resource Recovery Facility that is both for expansion and some renewal and replacement at that facility. The next 2 projects represent our partnerships with our partner agencies. So the first one there, the Brookman Sanitary Trunk Sewer Project in Sherwood, is a large investment in the expansion of the conveyance system. So this is working in partnership. We're actually managing and leading this project. It's about a 2-mile extension of the sanitary system from the existing southern limits of Sherwood all the way out to West Sherwood, including service to the new high school. I'm hearing some rumblings that you may hear some citizens' comments on that project coming up as well. So the second project, a partnership project with the cities, is the Bendemeer Trunk, and this one is actually in the city of Hillsborough. And again, this demonstrates our partnerships with the cities. The city is actually managing this partnership, or this project, but our intergovernmental agreements with the cities, when they're doing a conveyance upsize project and the diameter is larger than 12 inches in diameter, that is funded out of our regional SDC fund that the district collects 96% of those funds and then returns a portion of that to the cities in these projects that they manage. This is typical of one of those projects. This project is north of Highway 26 and supports some industrial growth area north of 26.
Andy?
Yes.
A couple questions, because that caught my attention, but you have Sherwood up there. So conveyance Sherwood is the Bendemeer trunk. So
you're
trying to figure out the connection there.
Yeah, you're right. We did a switch there. The Brookman project is in Sherwood. The Bendemeer project should say Hillsborough.
That's what I thought. So
yes,
the Bendemeer area was brought in on the Grand Land Bargain swap where we gave up. So I can't remember if that was 12 or 13 or whatever. I just remember thinking that's way up there and that's a long ways out. Here we are now talking about servicing that area. So that's finally coming. It's probably been at least 10 years since that's been brought in. So, yeah. So interesting. That did catch my attention on that. So, it's north of West Union. Yeah, and it's between, I think it's 185th and Cornelius Pass. So.
So it's correct on page 94. It's just incorrect on the slide.
Oh, okay.
Good catch. Thank you. Okay, moving over into the surface water management projects. You'll notice the dollar figures here are much lower, so we're not really going to talk about individual projects as much as we are kind of categories of the different projects on the surface water management. So we kind of refer to them as gray, green, and blue. And I'll give you kind of a definition or how we refer to those. The gray projects kind of refers to the gray infrastructure, the storm sewers that we have throughout the system. So that is the hard infrastructure, really focused on the conveyance system. So a lot of these are replacement projects. Sometimes it's contributing to a transportation project where we see an opportunity to really enhance and improve the existing conveyance system. And we will partner often with Washington County on a project to improve the storm system. That's the gray infrastructure. The green infrastructure is, again, constructed capital facilities, but these are the ones that are more natural in treatment. So these are often either water quality treatment for stormwater or hydromodification, or that volume control, where we are constructing what we really call them green facilities or low impact development approaches. So the stormwater treatment facilities that you'll see in subdivisions. So green infrastructure referring to the vegetation that provides that treatment and that filtration. And finally, the blue surface water management projects are the investments that we're doing in our natural systems, the riparian corridors, where these projects are often led by our Natural Systems Enhancement and Stewardship Department, and they go into the riparian corridors and do perhaps some minor grading to reconnect the creeks with their floodplain, but do a lot of vegetation enhancement for those buffer or vegetated corridors associated with the streams. So you'll notice the number of projects that we have there and the dollar figures. So if we average those out, we're running roughly $100,000 a project. So not large projects, often programmatic approaches to these improvements in those areas.
So Diane, you commented that the stormwater fees are likely to go up in future years. I know we're going to have more extensive permit requirements. Are those numbers going to be dramatically higher in the next 10 years to come? The number of projects that those dollars are going to be invested in? But the rate increase is going to mean more capital projects.
in unincorporated that currently don't have infrastructure. The blue piece happens a lot with the in lieu of fees that are paid by development, where we can be able to manage the stormwater issues within restoration of the creek systems themselves. So it's a blend of rate money, but also the fees that we do get from development that helps to fund these stormwater projects.
Our future, we've talked in the past, CWAC, about retrofitting existing storm facilities with, I guess, metered pipes. Are those the kind of projects that we might see in the future being in this capital program?
Yeah, that would be one of the green projects. We've demonstrated how we can get a lot better flow management by storing water and then releasing water. Yes, yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Go ahead, Elaine.
You sure? Okay. Andy, quick question for you. On page 95, I'm looking at the building facilities, and this is just purely out of curiosity question. The Ripple, is that going to be in what is now the ABC building, since you said Forest Grove?
Right, so it's actually a building in Forest Grove. I'm going to look over to either Diane or Rick to talk a little bit more about the Ripple facility.
Well, I'm just curious about the future of the ABC building, and we don't have to talk about it today.
So that's something that's part of the planning with the future of the ABC building. But the Ripple is out at Forest Grove. It's next to our resource recovery facility in Forest Grove. It's where our laboratory of the future is being developed, and also some conferencing ability. Yeah.
But it's also worth mentioning on page 95 that the new administration building, we did close on purchasing the building in the Cornell Oaks office facility. So, yeah. The ABC building just doesn't suit our needs. So this year, Diane and team will be figuring out next steps with regard to that building. Yeah, yeah. Architecturally cool, has some downsides. If I could, Chair, I just want to really compliment the staff team as well as CWAC. It's really interesting to watch the national news all throughout the course of the years, or through the course of a year, but to reflect on the change year to year. More hurricanes, more forceful hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, you name it. And so particularly with the swim work, Diane has mentioned the likely increases in regulations from EPA on the surface water management, not just because of what's in the water, but the volume of the water. And I just want to once again reinforce how important and what a vital role CWAC plays in helping us be prepared for the future and have developed good policies and forecasts. I learned through the West Basin Plan, part of that, there was a climate change analysis done and what might happen in different scenarios that really helped inform me about the level of preparedness work that the district is doing, which has raised my confidence level. So I just really feel, as a longtime member of our community, that we are fortunate to have the work of Clean Water Services staff and the process with CWAC, because we're anticipating what might happen, as opposed to living with, I look at Houston right now and it's like, ooh, I never want to live in a floodplain, right? So just hats off to all of you. Thank you so much.
We have a slide here, and you'll see a number of these slides associated with each department budget. And a lot of the departmental budget ones reflect on accomplishments and work that has happened in the past year. I wanted to focus a little bit more on this one because this is really projecting where the capital improvement plan is going over the next 5 years. So we'll talk briefly about each of these. The first one there, 3 significant building projects going on. We talked about the large portion of that bar graph that's dedicated to buildings over the next couple of years. We talked about the Ripple building and our new administration building. Third one is the Springer Street facility, which will be a field operations facility in Hillsborough. Another driver that we talk about are the regulatory components, and you'll see the largest project associated with that right now. I mentioned it as the Forest Grove Treatment Plant Project, or Water Resource Recovery Facility, dealing with the copper rules. Reuse. So you've heard a little bit about reuse. We have 2 reuse pump stations in the capital improvement in the 5-year plan right now. But that's really showing, again, that link to our regulatory component and our thermal offset that we're doing with water reuse and distributing that throughout the areas of the district. So two pump stations in the plan to support that initiative. We talk a little bit about our integrated projects, and these are some high-focus projects. These, here when we're talking about integration, and there are lots of things, integration can mean a lot of things. In this format, we're really talking about our combined gray, green, and blue infrastructure projects. I mentioned the Fano trunk sewer rehabilitation. Goes right down the Fano Creek corridor. So along with the infrastructure renewal there, we will be taking a close look at what are the opportunities to enhance the riparian corridor at the same time. So these are projects that are implemented interdepartmentally, great working teams that really come together to look at a comprehensive improvement project, not focused on any one of those areas, but all of them together. There was a question about our investment in infrastructural replacement and renewal, and we have 4 projects that are reflected in the 5-year CIP that are inflow and infiltration abatement projects. Again, this is keeping that stormwater out of the sanitary system where it's both taking up capacity in the conveyance system, at the treatment plant, and increasing operating costs at the treatment plant. So the more reduction that we can do, or the controlling of that inflow and infiltration, the better off we are. So again, a partnership project. We are implementing 2 of those where the district is the project manager. We have one going on right now over in the Cedar Hills area. There's also, we received a federal grant for about $1 million for the Western Washington County I&I abatement project. That's being implemented in Forest Grove. And then we're working with 2 of our cities right now on active projects. Beaverton has started on a large I&I abatement project, and Hillsborough has been a great partner and invested a lot of money over the years. And that includes a 50% Clean Water Services matching share of those projects as set out in our intergovernmental agreements. And then the last one, Commissioner Rogers, this one is especially for you. You have asked a question almost every year for as long as I've been here. How many unsewered lots do we have left in the county?
I thought you'd guess that.
So the number is approximately, because it changes every day, every time there's an annexation, so it fluctuates. But we're around 1,250 unsewered lots throughout the entire district area. About 750 of those are within Clean Water Services primary responsibility areas, so mostly the unincorporated areas. So we do have 5 projects going on in the current CIP that are extending the sewer system to serve those areas and take some more of those lots off of their septic systems and get them onto sewer. And those range anywhere from very small ones. I think our smallest one that's of those 5 includes 3 lots, up to the Brookman project, which has a reimbursement district component of it. Goes through about 25 lots, but is a $10 million project. So it covers a very wide gamut of projects. That gives you a little forecast into some of both the current projects and what's going to be happening over the next 5 years. So.
I knew I saw the table. It was in the Q&A document.
With that, I'll be happy to entertain any other questions about the capital improvement program.
I have a couple. Andy, first, nice job. I can hear me, but you can't. That's and probably it's only important that I hear myself anyway. First of all, nice job with the CIP, and I have some questions, and I'm not trying to make comparisons because every organization is different, but we've just gone through this a lot at the county side, and you're using a $50,000 number. They use $250,000, and that's I don't know how you settle on the 50. I think that's common, but I'd like you to comment on that. And then on, are there any assets that you didn't include in the CIP? Because when I went through and looked, I'm seeing some pretty small numbers in some of them, so it tells me that those are items that you consider to be still capital in nature. So was there any items that are not included so that we should know? And then thirdly, which you clearly say in your document, your financing mechanism for your CIP is ongoing and current. You're not looking at necessarily financing in the future. You might if you had something large like a new plant, but you have a finance plan to take care of your CIP issues. So, one, the 50,000. Two, is there anything not in here that we ought to know about? And three, are you financing things as you go along?
Well, I will say, so the $50,000 number that Commissioner Rogers is mentioning, that relates to our capitalization policy. So in looking and what we include in our capital planning booklet. So obviously any of the replacement renewal items that fall under that are then in our operating budget under material services, repair and maintenance type.
And the difference is accounted by the fact that there are different types of capital in each of the organization. And so the Washington County policy, given the nature of the capital there, is a much higher level than the type of capital equipment that CWS uses and manages.
So we have everything from treatment plants, pump stations, pipelines, all the way down to trucks and computer systems, data systems. So to answer for Clean Water Services, we have the whole gamut of capital assets within the CIP that we're planning.
So everything's included, pretty much? Nothing that was not included?
Yeah. Everything that we consider capital that needs to be capitalized is in the CIP. Yeah.
Good. So there's nothing missing. There will be more definition to some of the projects certainly as we adopt the West Basin Master Plan. It's going to more specifically identify projects that will roll onto it for next year. We also, again, kind of looking at that crystal ball, the first 1, 2, 3 years are pretty certain what projects we're doing. As we get out into years 4 and 5, we kind of have categories of projects. So we call some of those projects placeholder projects, and they end up being given more definition as they roll forward and closer to the first couple years. So they're all in there, but some are less defined than others.
And you're going to hear later with the natural systems and enhancement services how we're moving money that was budgeted in capital. It's actually now an operating expense. So you're going to hear a bit of why the operating budget went up is because of that classification of assets. So thank you.
Okay.
No, they're getting to it later today.
Who's responsible for the cost of sewer to septic? Like, is that the owners, or is that lots that have sold and being developed? Or can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so when we go from lots that are on septic systems to moving over onto sewer, And these are, assuming you're kind of referring to these reimbursement district or local improvement district projects. So the general approach and the philosophy is each property owner pays for that infrastructure that is benefiting their lot. So the extension of sewer mains to get them in front of the house is, the projects are generally, not all the time, but generally managed by Clean Water Services. And then we spread out the cost of that project to the benefiting owners, and they end up paying it back through either assessments on a local improvement district project or through a reimbursement district. They're very similar, some minor differences in them. But they end up paying for both that main extension as well as their investment includes the decommissioning of their existing septic system and then their connection, actually changing their plumbing to connect to that main that we've provided.
Is that voluntary, or is that like a goal? Are you guys trying to get everybody onto the sewer that's in those unincorporated areas?
So overall, for the health of the watershed, as the county densifies, septic systems aren't the greatest environmental solution as that densification happens. We have not been going out and pushing the projects. Often these are older neighborhoods that are reaching the end of their useful life of the septic system, and they have approached us and said, gee, what would it take to extend sewer systems here? So often they're driven by the property owners. There are times where, for efficiency reasons, Clean Water Services will actually propose the project. A recent example was Cornell Road between 109th and 107th and 113th, which was a county transportation roadway project, but it did not have sewers, and the residents did not have access to public sewer. So we partnered with the county, built the sewer with that. That was a reimbursement district. And then the owners, there is no time requirement in which to connect. So if they have a functioning septic system, they can stay on that. If their septic system fails, then the sewer is available and they must connect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got one question about your Becker Drive rehabilitation project. It calls for replacement of 2,000 feet of line, but in the budget you have $1.2 million marked in this other category instead of other construction equipment. Why is it? What's this other mean?
Which page
That is page 83. Chair,
of the CIP?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why that fell into an other category. It's we would consider that part of the rehabilitation of a line, so not an expansion. That is an area where there are root problems, so it's an area that our field operations group has identified that is creating excessive maintenance to try to control the roots. So we've worked closely. The roots, tree roots that infiltrate into the line potentially cause blockages. So we've worked closely with them to say, really, the solution to this is a replacement of that sewer. So.
Thank you.
I just want to compliment the whole team in putting together this budget document, both the document itself as well as these presentations. This budget document does such a good job of the storytelling of why this work is important, why these financials make sense for where we are now in the district, and the extraordinary amount of work that you've been doing to plan our future together for the benefit of the people, the businesses, and the place that we are occupying here with the Tualatin River watershed. So I just, hats off to you. Your effort shows, the graphics are wonderful, the financials are all right there, and every year I love reading your budget. I I know not to be embarrassed by the amount of material that I highlight for myself. It's just the continuous learning that I get out of reading your budget. I think I emailed Diane and Kathy the first day I was reading the CWS budget because I was so bloody excited I couldn't contain myself, and I just had to share it. So thank you again. You honor all of us on the budget committee by the extraordinary work that you put in here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Huge teamwork effort.
Yeah, I did want to directly answer Alex's question. You have a very good eye. So what it is the project manager set aside a budget for the project, but they have not allocated it between design and construction yet. So when it does get built in 26, fiscal year 2025, 26, they're going to make that allocation. So it's a proposed project. Some of the other projects, they know where the money is going to be spent. So that's why it's really a placeholder for what they think they're going to spend.
Thank you for that answer. It's just really glaring to me to see 1 point kind of just marked for whatever.
Yeah, they just don't know yet. Yeah, he needs the money, but he's not sure yet. Yeah.
Does that conclude your presentation, Annie?
Yes. Public comment.
Okay.
Perfect.
So this brings us to the first opportunity for public comment. And so I look to Clerk Moss. Do we have anybody signed up to comment or online?
Thank you, Kathy. Would any member of the auditorium wish to provide public comment on the CWS budget as you've heard the first part of the presentation today? Please raise your hand or start to come forward. Not seeing any in the auditorium. Would anyone online via Zoom for this meeting wish to provide public comment for up to 2 minutes on the CWS budget as you've heard so far? Give you just a moment to utilize raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nafisa. With that, we'd like to take a break, 15 minutes break, please. So thank you all for your presentation so far.
Emerald ash borer.
I know it. You know, it's not necessarily going to kill all the trees. It might just, but it can reduce them and then they'll sprout out more shrub-like.
Oh,
So we may not lose all the ash, but it might be a different type of canopy.
Okay.
And I know
As long as we
that
get the same
I know
degree of
there-
shade we need.
And there are other willows and things that can be.
All right, welcome back, Budget Committee members. And Mr. Chair, back to you.
Reconvene our meeting, and with that, we'd like to invite Rick to share about the engineering service functional area.
And I'm going to do the introduction.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Diane.
Oh, no. So this is one of the strategic changes we made in this year's budget. It's to aggregate our engineering services functional area as it relates to our conveyance and our treatment plant services and our construction management. It makes great sense because you saw in how it shifts between conveyance work and treatment work and other work. So it allows our acting director of we call it engineering and water technology, but the team let me know they actually want to be called WET. They actually want to be called water and engineering technology, but he'll be able to talk about that later. But it allows the career of an engineer to start in many different places, right? Whether it's conveyance moving into treatment or treatment moving into conveyance work. So Rick is going to talk about that, and we're really excited. We're putting research and innovation as part of this group because they really support our system. So with that, what I wanted to introduce is this new functional area is really moving people into a unified group, enhanced focus on capital planning, really integrating our construction and engineering tech services, our conveyance engineering, the research and innovation group, what was known as treatment plant services, and of course, how do we administer this this wonderful group of engineering and water technology. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Rick.
And before I forget, budget pages are 217 through 232. And yeah, I'm looking forward to building upon what Diane just mentioned, what we think are some real key strategic advantages to this new department, which I'm really happy and proud to be a part of and go over with y'all today. So the group itself, I'll go through each one of these boxes. Administration is me. It's the management team. As we saw on the previous slide, there are 5 divisions, so there will be 5 division managers, one of which is Andy with our capital planning group. And then we've got the other divisions that are lined out for you above. So capital planning really does focus on our master planning and a lot of our bigger integrated projects when it comes to both interdepartmental clean water services folks as well as external stakeholders. It is an enterprise-wide type of group, so there are things you'll notice here like permitting and easements that are also supported through this group that reach out throughout different areas of clean water services as well. So at current, there are 6 FTEs in the capital planning group. Construction and engineering support is fairly self-explanatory. We have lots of money to spend, about $100 million, and most of that is in what we build when it comes to actually putting the infrastructure together. So we've got a team of engineers, construction managers, as well as inspectors. There's 10 FTEs in that group. The other part, why it's called engineering support, is we included our CAD group, our computer-aided design group, and our 3D modeling team in there, in part because a lot of what construction ends up with are record drawings. And when you have plants that have been around for 40 years and all these sets of plans that used to be done on pen and paper, and then we went to computers, we're able to go in and scan existing facilities and create 3D models that accurately represent everything that is in a plant or in a pump station and so forth. So that is a real advantage that we're seeing with technology and how to bring that to bear for clean water services. So on the bottom left and right, on each side of research and innovation are what we're calling our capital delivery team. So that's conveyance engineering that, of course, are putting the pipes in the ground. They also house the pump station group, which formerly were in treatment plant services because there's a lot of electrical and instrumentation and structural things that go on in the plant. They used to be in that group. It really makes a lot more sense for them to be in conveyance. All that we're always comparing, is it a pipeline? Is it a pump station? How is this going to work in the future? So now that we're more of a matrix organization with all the engineers able to be more synchronized, it was an ability for us to move them into the conveyance group. So we've got 7 FTEs there. And then research and innovation. It's kind of surprising when I first saw this. It's like 16 FTEs in research innovation. So there are a lot of folks that are involved in that group. But what I want to point out is one thing we've done is we've tried to really model kind of at a university where you have postdoc level folks. We bring temporary people in. We bring experts in, sometimes for like a 2-year duration maximum, where they can really focus on a specific problem or need that we have within the district. So they're not all, they're not all full-time staff. And we'll talk about some of the things that all of these groups are going to be focusing on over the next year and beyond. So my baseline is 0, so it's pretty straightforward. We weren't here last year, so we'll be tracking this budget as we move forward and seeing how things grow and expand. We are generally very heavy on the professional services, of course. Some of the materials and services piece does relate to instruments and so forth that we use as part of our research and innovation program. But 51 total FTEs at this point. So new department integrates all the project phases. So it was fun working with Diane and others on this department, and one of the real goals that she stressed is having a matrix type group that can really collaborate and work together and share resources. And there is way more overlap between these different groups than even what I'm showing here, but the main overlaps are research and innovation and planning. So I'll talk about some of the what I think is cool, research projects, but really that team is probably 80% focused on actually doing process work, supporting regulatory affairs, supporting O&M. They're really driving when do we need to build our infrastructure and what processes do we need to be building. So a great amount of overlap happens between the nuts and bolts part of R&I with Andy's group in the capital planning. The other key part is project delivery. We don't want engineers just ending up with go design and build this. They have a lot of ideas when we're looking at alternatives, even the construction folks. How does this all make sense? So what we're delivering. So having that connectivity happening early on and with everybody under one roof really helps the planning group make wise decisions so that when it is time to do the design, we're all aligned. We're trying to really get far upstream in these processes so everybody knows what's coming. So when it's time for construction, we're able to very efficiently implement what we need to build. And then through startup and commissioning, our construction team helps with that. Certainly Logan's group and O&M and others are involved, but it loops back to R&I. Then the process folks get involved again. And, well, what we thought, is it really happening in the treatment plant? How is it working? Did we optimize what's going to happen? So we think this makes a lot of sense, and we're really excited. And the teams are all really excited to be part of this new group as well. So my little pun, R&I for ROI. So one of the things and we're going to be anxious to share, a lot of the details about some of these projects, but we really do require a business case analysis when we're looking to do research and innovation. It has to add value, either monetary savings, of course, it saves us on the size of an improvement, reduced operating cost. So that's a core benchmark for anything that we're trying to do. I wanted to give a few examples of some pilot research that's going to happen next year. The first one are nanobubbles for reducing operating cost. So what we're going to do is add nanobubbles into our polymer system. That's how we dewater the biosolids. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year dewatering biosolids, trucking it. So nanobubbles, technically known itsy-bitsy bubbles, they are less than 2,500. They're 2,500 times smaller than a grain of salt. They're so small you can't really see them, but they change the chemistry of water. And so there's all kinds of potential cool things that these might be used for. And what I like about this project, among other things, is we get approached from people a lot. We have a reputation in the industry that it's fun to work with Clean Water Services. We say no a lot. But this particular organization, unsolicited, can we talk to you, Rick, and your team? Yes. They're providing us equipment. They're providing everything at no cost, and we're going to test this out and see how it works. So our reputation and then the Ripple Center, I think, is really going to help us to continue to be able to look at things and be selective about the things that we look at. Indents for secondary treatment capacity. If you've been to Rock Creek and seen the ActiFlow process where we add the sand to make things settle out quicker, they glue, and we spin that stuff around and separate the sand out. We're going to try that same thing with our aeration basin, what's growing in their aeration basin. So we get rid of the things that don't settle, and we keep the things that do settle. And we also know that there's research out there that says the organisms that take phosphorus up settle better. So it might also help with performance. It'll help us quickly build more capacity without having to build basins. So that's happening next year. Logan's going to talk about biogas and some of our renewable energy projects. We've talked about some of the things that are happening. But we do have a team that is leading research in looking at all these things you can bring into your plant to make energy. Which ones are the best bang for the buck? Which ones might cause a lot of problems? So that's a big part of the research that's happening next year. I'll briefly mention AI because it's really on everybody's mind. We're in the process of doing a data management master plan. So for AI to work, you need good data. And we've really tried to step back from everybody wanting to sell us something to first making sure we have really good data that we're going to feed into AI, and then utilize that data to either reduce our staff's time, increase process reliability, try to have a targeted and methodical approach to that, because it's exciting and you want to just try all these new things. But first we have to make sure the data's there. So next year we'll have some updates on how that's going. A very, very high part of what this group does relates to regulatory compliance. So eDNA is ecological DNA. We're doing some stuff with Bob and Rad to try to understand coho migration and temperature impacts. We can look at the watershed through eDNA. So that's all through our MLab and watershed instrumentation work. I could go on, so I better hurry up. Andy hit capital planning pretty hard, so I can go through this one quicker. But it is the CIP. That's really the charge, is finding a way to better predict what our CIP needs are, really looking at the asset management and renewal and replacement piece and being very proactive and budgeting for those things. But it is also, when we're doing big planning projects, bringing in all of our internal stakeholders as well as external folks. So the Rosedale Pump Station is one where we're working with a lot of groups to try to maximize not just the value of the infrastructure, but do we need a park? Are there uplift opportunities and so forth? So when we say integrated projects, that's really what we're trying to look for, is bringing in other opportunities. And then advanced planning analytics for CIP forecasting and dynamic planning tools. I think every other couple weeks we have industries changing what numbers they have. So we really need tools that we can be responsive and give quick answers to things. An optimized infiltration and inflow program. We see that as a huge opportunity that we need to really be capitalizing on, and that's going to be a big charge for Andy and his team. So I lumped the delivery pieces together like I did on the first side with conveyance and the Water Resource Recovery Facilities Group, which is known as Treatment Plant Services. It is full scale from startup to operation. I want to point out that they are leading the design of the occupied buildings as well. So we have a lot of, it's not just what are we going to do at the treatment plants. That team is very busy with the occupied building spaces and working with the architects, as well as some big projects at Durham for biosolids treatment. We talked about the Forest Grove primary clarifiers. A lot of research was done into figuring out how to make those clarifiers work well for removing copper. And there'll be a lot of other benefits to that project as well, but that really is a core piece. Conveyance engineering, I mentioned that we brought the pump station program in. We've talked about Fano Basin quite a few times. We're in the concept stage right there. We're really hoping to utilize that wet weather pump station to gain us a lot of capacity in the winter, but also to serve as a recycled water pipeline to bring flow back in the summertime. The Metzger Trunk project started in planning as an integrated planning project. Now we're into the design. This one I wanted to highlight how we're trying to really advance looking at DEI initiatives So we've got, I think we call it equity road mapping. Is that the term, Diane? It was a new term that I learned when I practiced this presentation, but I know it's in the scope. Equity mapping. So when we're looking at putting a pipe in the ground, doing the equity mapping to understand the various, are there ways to make it better, for areas, to use it as an improvement or to not cause more problems. So that's an exciting thing. That's a really neat part of the scope of work for this next phase. Construction engineering and support services. So in the past, a lot of the construction groups there were conveyance inspectors, there were treatment inspectors, there were different types of contracting mechanisms. Bringing all these folks together really helps with the balancing of the resourcing. So when you see the CIP change, construction's a big part of that. And being able to move folks between the different areas, not only does it make their job more interesting? They really like this if they've been doing pipeline work to be able to do other things. But it helps us to not need to have consultants as much to fill those peaks. We can move our own folks around to help do with that because they've been trained now to be able to serve multiple functions, and we've made things consistent enough that they're able to do that. So those are the key pieces with that piece. It's the same with the engineering group. Diane mentioned the junior engineers that we're trying to bring in, having them be able to do multiple types of engineering. It's really going to benefit retention with staff. It helps us, it also bringing people in that they can see I've got a diverse range of opportunities that I can try out things and see what I like to do. Okay. I am going to leave this one for Q&A. I won't go through all the details, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Hey, Rick, I have a couple questions for you, but first off, I love the equity mapping. I love that you are doing that. That is a great approach, and I just want to applaud you for it.
Thank you.
Why Forest Grove for copper? And do you have to convey from other plants up to Forest Grove? I'm just curious about that.
Bob?
Call a friend.
Bob tells me what to do, and no, he does a great job of explaining the why to do it, but he can give you the details on why Forest Grove, because it's a wet weather issue, which is very unique. So we have high flows only at Forest Grove in the wet weather to deal with. So take it away, Bob. Why Forest Grove?
Thank you, Rick. That was very well done. Maybe I could add a little more detail.
Yes, please.
A couple of years ago, for those who will remember, we talked a lot about copper and copper limits, the permits, and the new water quality standard that DEQ was developing. Clean Water Services invested in the analysis and sampling for copper so that we could greatly influence the standards that came out of the state of Oregon. We did so. We were very successful. DEQ did then find that there was not reasonable potential that we would exceed criteria under the current conditions. But as we looked, any growth at Forest Grove would cause us to exceed the copper criteria. So a lot of what we were doing is looking to the future, which has a great advantage for us because Rick and his team can now incorporate that into their planning, their West Basin planning, so that we can control our own fate about how we respond to copper. The reason it's specifically interesting up at Forest Grove is copper, like many other metals, will have different forms. It forms complexes with carbon, organic carbon, and the inorganic carbon as well. There's a lot of inorganic carbon in water, and it'll also bind to the sediments. What's left is the free copper, the cupric ion, and that's what's toxic to fish because it'll go into their gills and cause all kinds of disruption. And what we find up at Forest Grove is it's a different river up at Forest Grove than in the lower river where we may think of it. It is very clean. It is very dilute. It does not have much organic carbon. And when we see these rains that we see in Western Oregon coming off the forest, it's really fairly acidic, so we see some low pH. When we have those low pHs, we do not see or find very much of the inorganic carbon in the river itself. Because of that, that shifts the copper into the or the cupric form, which is toxic. And so where we run into these problems somewhat uniquely is not during the summer, which is typical, and in part because our natural treatment system does such a good job of forming these complexes, but it is when we see those rainfall, that rain condition, and it's really the tailing edge of the hydrograph. The river goes up, comes back down. After all the suspended solid settles out, we've just got a very dilute river, and whatever copper in there is in the form that's toxic. And we also have a fair amount of natural copper in the upper basin, so we are at about what the criteria would be in the upper basin, so there's very little for Forest Grove to play with. We have also worked with some of the industrial sources up there to remove copper and move it down to some of the other plants. So rather than moving water up to Forest Grove, we are moving some of the industries down. The big advantage to that is that it actually gives us capacity, once we get this all done, that Forest Grove would be able to accept additional sources, industrial sources that may have copper. Had we not done that, that would have been very restricted.
Why is there more natural copper up in the Forest Grove area?
Chair Harrington, I was not very clear. We have more copper in the basin.
Oh.
And it's just dilute up at Forest Grove. By the time we get down to the lower part of the river, there's a little bit more ionic strength in the river.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, did that help?
That helped? Yeah, I was going to say that, but I know. So, yeah, but yeah, we did. Good question about, a lot of the West Basin planning when we've been meeting has been, where do we want to put the water? So that was a good question. And we're in the process of adding the infrastructure to move some of those industrial flows so they don't go to Forest Grove. What Forest Grove does, why it's partly also in the winter, our natural treatment system does great with copper in the summer, but it can't take, it doesn't, in the winter when we have high flows, we can't use it all. So we have to have this additional treatment.
I have another question that I'm not sure where it belongs, if anywhere today, but it's around the West Basin Master Plan and the CHIPS Act and the CIP. Mm-hmm. Does the CIP change, and I'm not asking anybody to forecast the North Plains politics, however, are there any things in the CIP or the budget that would change or that you need to be nimble about or prepared for depending on what happens there? And I'm happy to talk during a break with someone about that if it doesn't fit here.
Well, no, it's a yes, things will change, and we need to be nimble. And a lot of what we're doing with the engineering group and Andy, we're in a lot of contact with this, the city and understanding what's going to potentially happen there, as well as with the industries that are there. I would say the dollars are there for a most likely scenario, and it's fairly conservative. So we don't want to be caught where we can't take advantage of an opportunity, with the CHIPS Act. The timing of things is what most likely would change, and probably not so much in even the near, I would say, 3-year period, but some of these bigger infrastructure improvement projects, if we're talking 15 MGD or, I'm not making up a number, but giving you a sense of the scale. So it's more about how much is really going to come and when does it happen. But I feel like we've done a good job through a lot of communication and frequent communication of having the right scenario and also having the bookmarks, kind of a high range and a low range to address that.
Yeah, it's sort of a good rule of thumb is when someone new comes, it's big, it could take up to 4 years to do treatment changes, and it's probably about 2 years to do pipeline and pump station change-out. So we're always looking ahead. So that's why the team works really hard to partner and to communicate and to understand. And I think that's some of their secret sauce. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I've learned a lot from the staff and the planning about how they have a sense for for growth and change. So there's this cushion that can help us through these 2-year to 4-year timeframes before we have to invest in another big basin or something else. And then they're exploring other techniques to avoid having to build new basins as well. So it's just an amazing ecosystem of solutions. So it's not as simple as thinking, oh, well, Intel's going to expand, so all of a sudden we're going to get another big chunk of volume to deal with. There's some room there, planning and technology.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, members of the Budget Committee. We have 35 slides and about 27 minutes to get through all of them. So I am going to try some speed talking as we get through this. Please feel free if you have any questions, stop me. But I want to start off. Rick was talking about the importance of research and innovation, and I want each of you to understand how critical it is to our operations and maintenance. There's about 5 or 6 individuals that are dedicated to our facilities with near-term research, and it absolutely has a day-to-day impact on how we operate and maintain our facilities. And the way that I see the creativity, the collaboration, his team challenges my team challenges his team, and it's really just it's fun to watch. Some of the meetings that I attend, when I see them working together, it's very gratifying. So I wanted you to know there's some really good relationships that are there. So today we're going to talk through the utility operations functional area. So the first, water resource recovery operations and services, addresses our treatment facilities. Utility operations and services is our conveyance system, our collection system, so field ops associated with the pipelines, both stormwater and sanitary. Enterprise asset and technical services, there's a myriad, but it's facilities, control systems, asset management, electrical engineering. There's a number of different groups there that provide a diversity of services to the operations group. And of course, natural systems enhancement and stewardship in compliance with our NPDES permit for our thermal issues associated with the Shade Credit Program. And as Chair Harrington spoke to, we will on the final slide discuss the Emerald Ash Borer. There are, about 243 staff in this area. Oh, and I forgot to mention, it's the next slide. This is also the bulk of our represented staff. So most of those folks are within my area of responsibility. Moving on to the Water Resource Recovery Program, that's page 293 in your budget book. And this is, of course, our treatment facilities. You can see that there are 103 positions within this group, everything from handling the residuals, biosolids, and reuse to our larger resource recovery facilities at Durham and Rock Creek, our smaller facilities at Hillsborough and Forest Grove, and of course our pump stations and force mains. The budget is summarized here. You can see that there's a distinction or an increase in the materials and services budget of about 13%. Diane mentioned this earlier, but one thing we are pleased is that for the last two and a half years, what we saw were double-digit inflationary increases in our chemical costs. This year, they're actually into the single digits, which is an improvement, but it has shown significant cost increases. Also in this area, as a result of the permit, the teams are testing different ways of meeting our compliance limits. So last year and this year, we're actually using a bit more chemicals to see if in the future we can use less chemicals. So we're making that investment this year and the next to help with our permit negotiations, which will be occurring in about 3 years. A couple of other interesting elements, because electricity is included in this portion of our budget. Forest Grove Power and Light has gone up 9.6%. PGE services Rock Creek and Durham and Hillsborough. Rock Creek is an 11.6% increase in electricity. Durham, 12.4%, and Hillsborough is also a 12.4%. So we're seeing double-digit increases in electricity. So at the time when our chemical costs are starting to smooth out, our electrical costs are increasing rather significantly. You'll also notice that there's been a change in position. So you see that 119 to 103. That represents the creation of the engineering and water technology, or water and engineering technology, whatever it becomes next year. That group, transferring those folks. And of course, we're incredibly pleased to help support that team, because again, it means a lot. It means integration of like-minded folks. It means the career pathways that Rick alluded to. And again, I think just better collaboration with the operations and maintenance group. Encouraging staff growth. This is something we have talked about in prior years, and within about 30 days, we are going to begin hiring for our internship positions. So this has taken about 2 years to build the training platforms to ensure that we can take someone from basically the only requirement is they need to be 18 years old. They can come in, learn about our industry in different areas, whether it's plant maintenance technology, operations, electrical instrumentation, and pump stations, just the myriad of opportunities that occur on the operations and maintenance side. And we have created pathways. So my goal is that someone can come in, whomever he or she, they may be at the age of 18, and replace me. That is my absolute goal. So again, our most valued employees are existing employees, and it's important that we invest in their training and the opportunities for them to have lateral opportunities. So we've mentioned here the creation of the...
I have a quick question here. Do you have partners in this process? And when I say partners, I'm curious about PCC, I'm talking about labor, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. We did a very concerted effort beginning about 1.5 years ago in reaching out to external partners. Whether it's, there's actually so whether it's Central Cultural, whether there's a group of individuals who represent women in the industry that are in the trades. I'm trying to remember their name, but it's not coming to me right now. But yes, we've reached out to about 4 or 5 different groups to make certain that when these opportunities arise, we will advertise with them, they will know, and then hopefully that will help provide more diversity of candidates for these entry-level positions so that they can learn about our industry.
From point of content, it's internal?
Internal.
The training content.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, all of the training content is internal. Mm-hmm. Continuous improvement. Again, I just mentioned that we're working with the Research and Innovation Group to ensure that we continue our process of evaluating our system for maintaining compliance. We did a number of tests last year with R&I. We're doing a number of tests this summer. But we're really trying to create a consistent focus across the groups related to asset management. Currently, we have asset management in a couple of different areas, and we want to ensure this year that we have a consistent process that's methodical, that's applied similarly, whether you're working in the collection system on the electrical equipment, or whether you're talking about the mechanical equipment associated with the facilities. This relates to condition assessments, and of course, what we're very concerned about are thermal compliance issues, which of course I anticipate Bob will discuss during his presentation. Resource recovery growth. In this instance, you see, I'm just going to focus on the renewable natural gas opportunities. There's a number that we're following. But for those of you that have been on a tour with me at Rock Creek, there's a really unique opportunity there because we have excess capacity in our digesters that's designed for growth. And what I want us to do is to be able to utilize that through a non-rate revenue process where we can bring in high-strength waste while we have that capacity to generate additional renewable natural gas, which is methane, and be able to provide a different type of service to the commercial and industrial enterprises within our community. So not everything that comes to Clean Water Services has to flow through a pipe. Okay, it can actually be trucked in. We can convert that waste, make it more environmentally safe. And if you're familiar with Metro's requirement to divert pre- and post-consumer food waste from landfills, this is an opportunity where Clean Water Services can continue to benefit and support our communities. And of course, create that ultimate vision for a net zero for our facilities. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is we're very excited this year because Rock Creek is going to begin providing reuse water to the golf course, the reserve golf course. So now both Durham and Rock Creek will be providing that resource to their service areas. We have as much capacity as we can possibly build with sufficient planning and knowledge of where that interest is. We're currently working on a reuse master plan to help us understand what the ROI is related with our reuse projects and different types of reuse projects. But of course, the goal, because of the thermal issues associated with the Rock Creek and Durham facilities, is if we're able to move that heat that's associated with that effluent away from discharge to the Tualatin River, and we can move that heat and that water to someplace upland where it does not become an issue, we get value added, right? So multiple bangs for the buck. It's not just providing the reuse water to the site that has the benefit, but it also has a direct regulatory compliance benefit to us as well. Yeah. So we want to support that as much as we can.
Well, yeah, golf courses consume a lot of water. So
Yes.
Shifting to a reuse program would be very cool.
Absolutely. Yes. Are there any questions? Okay. Utility Operations and Services Department, this is page 275 in your budget book. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is related to the gravity collection system and our stormwater system. You may have noticed during Andy's presentation there was a thin dark blue line that was related to equipment, fleet vehicles. This is the group that uses our largest amount and our heaviest equipment, and we are still having issues associated with the pandemic. So the supply chain of the areas that I track, heavy equipment is still largely problematic, and we are still looking at delivery times in excess of 14 to 18 months just to get some of the basic equipment chassis, let alone to then do the improvements that we need to create our specialized equipment for what we're doing. So just be aware. That's why you see some increases there, is because we're still trying to catch up. And this equipment, I've always said, if I won the lottery, would I buy a Ferrari or would I buy a Vector? I tell you, I'd buy a Vector because they're way more cool and they're about the same price, you know? Oh. In this group, you can see that we have 79 positions. This group has also changed. The folks that were in conveyance engineering that were associated with utility operations are now within Rick's group. Again, a great opportunity to improve the collaboration between those folks. And you see that here with the change from 95 positions in 2024 to 79 positions in 2025. One of the interesting elements here on the materials and services, the increase of 5%. I don't know if this is TMI, but I was really I had fun. I had my first colonoscopy, was awake for the whole thing, got to watch the video. It was kind of neat, right? Because it reminded me of the videos that you see in the collection system. Well, the... It just is what it is. So the fun thing here is that every 4 or 5 years, we essentially have to do a colonoscopy of the main sewer line that goes to Rock Creek with 5 sensors. And we're all really excited to actually see, okay, you know, what's going on in that main pipeline that goes to Rock Creek and just understand. So that's why you're seeing that 5% increase in the materials and services cost here. It's for that multi-sensor analysis, again, that occurs every 4 or 5 years. And just think of it like a colonoscopy for the sewer line. Okay, maybe that was too much TMI. All right, thank you, Chair. Related to the personnel and facilities here, so we talked about some of the great improvements we've made on the resource recovery facilities. We are mimicking some of those improvements on the field operations side. So we now have 2 superintendents. One is focused on the maintenance activities, one is focused on the construction activities. And again, it just helps create that symmetry between the 2 houses to ensure that they have equivalent folks that they can work with, and also to ensure that there are multiple pathways for success associated with them. Some of the same requirements related to the 3 positions regarding certification and higher levels of technical skill are being applied with this group as well. So it's really an exciting time, I think, to be someone who is an entry level, that Gen Z person coming in, because we're truly trying to create multiple opportunities for them to grow. One of my proudest new staff persons left our group. So she was actually a kindergarten teacher, came in, worked in operations, decided that wasn't quite their thing, and moved into environmental services and pretreatment, and is doing just fantastic. That's exactly what we want. We want people to come in, learn more about clean water services, find a spot that works for them, and as Diane said, retire with clean water services when the time comes, right? Keep growing, keep learning. If you want to learn in a different area, there's a pathway to do that. So, yes, absolutely. Some really excellent things are going on. I mentioned the asset management, and you're going to see that as a consistent theme through all of the groups in what's occurring with WRD as well as what's occurring with field operations. So again, those 3 groups are starting to learn, okay, what do we do similarly? What do we do dissimilarly? Where do we need to build collaboration? Where do we need to provide stronger alignment? And are the tools that we're using able to interact and work with one another, which is where digital solutions comes in. I've got 12 minutes. Very
How
good.
long did it take for that pipeline to become exposed like that, you think?
You know, it really depends on the hydrologic conditions and the amount of flow, because you can have something look just fine one day and then it gets an eddy behind it, and depending on the soil structure, it can just be gone. So as part of our program, this is why we have a team that goes out and evaluates the different assets that we know may have a particular issue. I think what's great about this particular image is that the team identified the issue and was actually able to correct it with it was a really great collaborative effort with the city of Tigard to go in and do this project, because it did impact one of their parks. And they got it done in about 3 days before the first major rain event, and it held up just fine. So it's a great opportunity to see how we collaborate with our member cities, as well as how our team understands and recognizes risk, and then moves rapidly to address it internally. All of the improvements to address this issue were done by our internal construction staff.
I've learned a lot about gravity flow and where it made sense to put these pipelines. Tends to follow gravity just like water does, and that's where we end up with more and more of these scenarios. So thank you.
I think that one's about 15 years in the making, yeah. But the team did a fabulous job with Logan and the whole team assessing it and doing the construction change that needed to happen to stabilize the bank. It was really amazing to watch our construction crew do an emergency repair. So, yeah, we needed a video, I think. But you're absolutely right. As the rainfall intensity changes, it's just, these things happen. So it's really a great work between natural systems and the conveyance and the engineering team all working together to find the solution. But yeah, we have, how many more, Logan? I think there's 25 of them that we're watching easily. And they have a nice way of looking at it between when we need to take an action versus we're still on watch. Yeah.
Yes, we've evaluated them, broken it down into 3 categories based on risk profiles, whether the risk profile is associated with either environmental or public health or both, and then slope and a number of different engineering considerations that are occurring. So that's actually one of the programs that's largely managed through our NSES program. Yeah, again, shows the collaboration and how multifaceted our teams are.
And actually, there's some of them that are going away because the sewer systems have been developed on either side, and then that connection is no longer needed. So, yeah, it's a story of sort of managing and changing as needed. Yeah.
much like the pump stations, is as this system develops, there's the opportunity to address some of these inconvenient gravity lines, and when possible, we do. Yeah. All right, with that, I'd like to invite Joe Gall to join me. Joe is providing oversight of our Enterprise Asset and Technical Services Department, and we are on page 235 of your budget book.
Thank you, Logan. Good morning, everyone. Last year, I was just thinking, listening, last year I had the interim NSCS director position during the budget process, and this year I have the interim EATS director position that I've had the benefit of working with for about 6 months now. So I'm going to touch on the beginning of this presentation, and the more specifics Logan will cover. So EATS, or Enterprise Asset and Technical Services, is a pretty diverse group. A number of these are technical in nature: asset management, control systems, the SCADA systems, technical support are much more technical. In my interim role, when those issues come up where there's technical advice or decisions, I tend to rely on Logan or Rick, depending on the specifics, and they help out in those areas. And then you have facilities maintenance and safety, which are more across the organization, provide services across the organization, more in my comfort zone. So it's a diverse group. I have been focusing mainly on providing that general management support, keeping the train moving forward, making sure contracts are moving forward, requisitions, helping on HR issues and things like that. And then the technical areas, I tend to kick over to the guy next to me or to Rick to help out on. It's been a great, just like my experience with NSCS, I learned so much about NSCS in working with them. I'm working much more inside the fence with very technical people. I am not a technical person, I always say, but I'm learning every day and really learning what they do and how important their programs and services are to the whole utility, which has been great for me personally. The one item on the budget, you see the reduction in the FTE of 1. That is a person that is now shifted over to Rick's new team in water, well, is it water and environmental technology? Wet. It's so wet. So there was one position that has shifted over from EATS over to that team because it's a better fit. So, and that's it from me.
Thank you, Joe. As Joe mentioned, there's a number of programs that are here, and different structure. The facilities maintenance program manages our occupied structures throughout the entire district. So you can see here there are really a number of great projects. A couple that I want to highlight, of course, is the Greenbrier building and getting that ready for staff. But also for the first time, I mentioned this last year, but we now have the completed list, and of course it's prioritized. But we have a lot of roofs and a lot of HVAC systems. So HVAC does not necessarily like, or our electrical equipment doesn't like it when things are too hot. So we have to maintain that situation where it's just right. And of course, we don't like it when roofs leak on top of all of our very expensive equipment. So we've gone through that. This team has done a great job of identifying where all of those issues are, creating a schedule, and making those investments. We're also looking at ways to ensure that we have a consistent security system throughout all of our facilities. So as you can imagine, with the number of facilities that are throughout, there's been different approaches at each of those facilities. So I still have the big, huge ring of keys if I need to go to different places, and we're hoping to modernize that and simplify the process when we get an alarm and we're trying to figure out, okay, which building is this alarming at, and and the one I always have to remember is, okay, what's the code that I need to tell the operator so that they don't call the police department because one of my staff accidentally opened a door, that type of thing.
And you mentioned the Greenbrier building, which is probably a building like, what is that? That's our new admin building. So it's on Greenbrier Road, and that's why we're referring it to as Greenbrier, just as a heads up.
Thank you, Joe. One of the other programs that's recently the facilities has taken on is houseless prevention and remediation. So we have a number of issues with this throughout the district. And of course, we want to maintain the dignity of the individuals involved, but also ensure that the environmental assets as well as the mechanical assets are protected. So we spend a lot of money each and every year ensuring that we're planting our natural areas, that we're maintaining our equipment, and it's important both to the safety of those individuals and to the community and the environment around that we have an active program, again, that ensures the dignity and safety of those individuals involved.
I wanted to really give a shout out to Washington County. This is where we partner really well with the county's programs, and it's just that sometimes people tend to camp in some of these areas, and when they're sitting on top of the manhole, it creates a bit of a problem when the maintenance folks are trying to maintain it. So we're really coordinated well, and we really appreciate the Washington County staff.
Also wanted to mention that with our safety program, there's a significant focus this year on ensuring that we have consistency throughout our safety program and ensuring that our risk program and our safety program are coordinating with one another. Again, you saw with the CIP, we have a lot of construction projects going on at our facilities, both internally as well as externally, and it's important that both the staff that are unfamiliar with our sites are trained in how to do work safely at our facilities, as well as our own staff have that focus. Just as I always love this statistic, but back when I started, this was in one of my training manuals, but our industry was the second most dangerous industry in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The only industry that was more dangerous was coal mining. And we have spent a lot of effort counteracting that, and now we don't even rank on those lists when you look at the federal statistics. So it's very important, because if you've been to our facilities, we have every imaginable type of safety concern on those sites. The technical support group, this is everyone that helps make certain that all of the equipment talks to one another so that we know what's occurring where, so that I can go to the computer in my bag right now and figure out what's going on at any of our facilities if there's a particular issue. So they do a wonderful job of maintaining that equipment. But again, with control systems, this is an area where you will start seeing some significant investments, because this area has aged out, and it's very important that we replace that equipment. Diane was commenting on the length of pumps and those types of systems, but when it comes to control systems, their lifespan is about half of that. So we're typically looking at a 10 to 15-year replacement cycle, and we're right there right now with a lot of this electrical equipment, because again, many of the facilities were built at roughly the same time because the growth drivers for those facility upgrades occurred at the same time. So there's a pretty significant effort in that area. Questions? Okay, 3 minutes. Thank you, Joe. Please turn to page 261 in your budget book. And this is one of my favorites, natural systems enhancement and stewardship. So, you know, I've spent the bulk of my 30-plus year career on what's called the gray infrastructure side, playing around with treatment plants, raw sewage, all of those fun types of things. And it's really a joy to be here at Clean Water Services. My undergraduate degree is in ecology, and I've never really been able to appreciate it, because I would always talk to my staff about, aren't you excited that we're cleaning the water and look what it's going to? Here we have an entire team that I can geek out with, because they get it, right? And they're so much more knowledgeable than I, so it's just a wonderful team. There are 28 positions here. Landscape Strategies is the planning group, so they are the ones that are thinking not only about today and what's happened in the past, but what's going to be happening 5, 10, and 20 years from now, related to things like emerald ash borer. Project Delivery is that group that focuses on what types of projects are we building now and in the future to address our shade credit program, stormwater programs, our partnership opportunities with others, and all of those types of elements. And then, of course, Stewardship, who is kind of like the operations and maintenance group, except for they get to have fun going out in the field and planting trees rather than pushing buttons, turning valves, and taking sludge judge measurements. There have been just 2 minor changes in this group. related to personnel. Both of these were transfers. One was to CCE and the other one was to a different planning group. Diane mentioned this earlier. So we went through a 2-year process to completely review all of the capital, operating, maintenance expenses with this team, district rules, and this is the second year and the final year in the transition. So you see there's a significant increase of 71%. This is the largest within all my groups on materials and services, but this is not an increase. This is simply a shift. So as the trees age, if you think about the comparison to gray infrastructure, when it's finished being built and you turn it on, it's done, it's capitalized. With green infrastructure, because trees grow and there are changes, it's not quite so clear cut. So it was very important that we reviewed how NSCS budgets to ensure that once an ecosystem reaches a level of stability that you can capitalize it, but then also that funds associated with operating and maintaining those sites are shifted to the appropriate area. So what you're really seeing here is a transfer from your capital budget into your operations and maintenance budget, because these costs are occurring within your stewardship group, not within your project delivery group. So that's the reason for that change. So sort of like an increase, but not.
Logan?
Yes.
Does that happen at a particular year mark or a free-to-grow stage, or how do you decide to shift from capital to stewardship?
That is the question of the day, right?
Okay.
That is the exact point. So that's a wonderful question, Elaine. There was a debate internally about when that should occur, and it had occurred for many, many years, and it led to some real difficulties in, well, when do we capitalize these assets and they're put on the depreciation schedule? So as part of our internal review, and when I went through the budget with the team members, we really created some metrics around, okay, what do we mean by this and when, and we looked at everything from a 3 to a 10-year schedule and trying to understand, okay, well, what's happening, and what we settled on, without going into all of the details because I am now 3 minutes over, suffice it to say, we settled on 7 years. Aaron doesn't give me evil looks anymore. Kathy is happy as well. Our NSCS team is good. Oh, and Lisa, sorry about that. I would like to introduce you to Lisa Huntington, our new NSES director. So if you haven't had a chance to meet her, please do. She's fantastic. And as Diane mentioned, where are we getting staff from? We stole her from BES.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. We're very pleased to have her.
And Logan, 7 years is very reasonable.
I thought so too, after looking at all of the factors that were involved, and yeah.
Yeah, I would think with the planting that Metro has done, but also the timber industry in replanting and cycles that they go through. The financial models might be there, let alone with carbon credits and the whole offset industry. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you on the team.
On this slide, you see ecological management units. This is actually pretty neat. So as the program has matured, this gives us the ability to actually group various sites that are geographically located within the same area and actually have one contractor be able to provide sort of a multitude of services based on what the actual need is at the site, rather than predetermining, well, we want you to do this here and we want you to do this there. So it is intended to lower our costs and provide more flexibility to our staff that are managing those sites, as well as be more responsive to what the sites need based on that collaboration between our contracted partners and our internal staff. The other one I want to mention is the uncrewed aircraft systems, also known as drones. This is kind of neat. As I've learned more about this, we're actually looking at ways to utilize the sensing technologies that this team uses at the resource recovery facilities to be able to understand how certain aspects of our operation are impacted, and some of those you can only see from the air, because when you're a human and you're walking around, you don't always have access to those spots. So it's pretty neat, again, to see how multidisciplinary our operating group is becoming. Maximizing impact, again, stormwater fee-based programs. We've talked There's a number of different opportunities that are here. We look forward to expanding our collaboration with the cities through the opportunities with the new IGAs between Hillsborough and eventually Beaverton. There's a number of ways that we can improve and enhance what we're both trying to do, and I think there's some great opportunities in the future. Equity, diversity, and inclusion, this is a pretty neat area where I think NSES has really excelled. So they're doing a number of activities to do outreach to make certain that as they are contracting, what are the real barriers? What are some of the opportunities in how we think about the contracts that they let to go through and do some of this vegetation management? Are there barriers that are there that are meaning that maybe some small contractors could actually come in and manage some of these EMUs? Maybe not all of them, but maybe some of them. So the team is really taking that to heart. The peer-to-peer learning, again, understanding if we have unintentional biases or those types of elements and making certain that we are aware of them so that we can combat them. And finally, this is pretty interesting, is using indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. So as we are thinking about climate change and also the impacts associated with EAB, are there other resources that are out there that have a different type of knowledge that we could incorporate as we evaluate these scenarios for the future? Skip ahead. So I'm just going to focus on the EAB question that you asked earlier, Chair Harrington. The team has identified that near term, so 1 to 3 years, there's about $40,000 worth of risk associated with ash trees. And they've already gone out and surveyed all of the areas where there's a concern, walkways, pathways, people having access. We don't want these branches or trees to fall and create another issue. They're also doing a great job of coordinating with all of the local partners that are in this area. One of Lisa's staff, Rob, recently won an award for being that, what I would call the lead collaborator, getting all of those groups together. And the fact that it's a CWS employee, again, shows how we really strive to be a strong community partner. And then finally, we're working very closely, and I would say that, again, with Rob's assistance, we are actively engaging in ways, management techniques and tools to limit the spread of emerald ash borer beyond the Forest Grove area. So there's the hope that what we saw occur on the East Coast will not occur as rapidly, or that some of the techniques that have been learned on the East Coast will be applied at a much earlier time here to ensure that we minimize its impact. And one of the neat things about this is this team is also evaluating with climate change, with EAB, what types of plant species do we want to put into the ground? Are they the appropriate ones for this area? And the little fun fact associated is one of the climate adaptive species that would do well would be poison oak. But the team thought, well, maybe we don't want to plant more of that in our area, and I applauded that decision. With that, are there any questions? And I'm sorry to run 9 minutes over.
The team also informed us there's another critter in our region. It's called the Mediterranean oak borer beetle. So that team is very good at tracking what's going on, and that's an unfortunate one because it goes after the white oaks, our mighty white oaks. So, but the team does such a great job seeing this, and we're lucky to have the expertise that we have to help with our shade program and add value to the broader region. Yeah, these critters are pretty amazing, what they do. Yeah.
Fortunately, I think the oak borer situation is not quite as grim as the ash.
Andy, I have a question. This can be a lunch question if necessary. I know Washington County has identified some significant natural resource areas, waterways. Does Clean Water Services have any plans around those areas?
Lisa?
We need you to come up to the mic, sorry.
So maybe I can help with that. So under Goal 5, Washington County identifies these significant spaces. So when we see where they are and in working with Washington County and through the land use, Clean Water Services is not a land use entity, but we do this coordinating activity. So with the primary agencies are the county and the cities, and then Clean Water Services helps support it as we're making our decisions.
Thank you.
Hope that helps. Yep. Yeah. Lisa says, thank you, Diane. Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, with that, it's time for lunch, and so we'll take our next. Oh, nope.
So we're running about 10 minutes behind, so I feel like that maybe we should start the afternoon 10 minutes later, if that's a preferred option, because we only schedule 45 minutes for lunch, so we're worried that you don't have enough time. You think? 35 is fine? It's in the multi-purpose room. Yeah.
So it's here.
Here.
There. What time do you want us back here?
I think
So-
1:10.
1:10?
Does that sound good? Yeah.
I think so.
Great.
Perfect.
All right.